keyboards all the time, and then autocorrect turns it into something really dumb.
Hello. Let's hang out. Go do a little dance, Deb.
Oh, yikes!
Yay. Okay.
And now Luke is saying.
Oh, we're trying to get the lights right for everybody.
Who's
on there?
Reply is on. I'm away at the
Yeah,
National
figure out
Interfaith Power and Light conference. Thank you, Luke.
You know what we can do is we can get it all set and then we can stop the broadcast and start a new broadcast. So we have a.
I'll call it AED.
Okay.
It's okay.
Fine.
It's okay. I just take my
Yeah,
computer
we don't
and
need
because
it.
my work card is bad,
If
so
there's
I
somehow
moved it when I left
So
town.
good, yeah.
Because I thought, well,
Okay. I was
I'll
just
manage.
asking this.
I have my tablet. It's not ideal, but
Okay, so you know what I want to do?
I have two phones.
So you
I
should be
wanna-
Work,
I want to get
personal.
everybody to move their chairs into the center of the circle.
Yeah, great idea.
All right, we're just going to take our chairs and we're going to move it into the center of the circle and just sit around that pad.
Alrighty.
Sorry, Susan.
It's actually harder to write like that, though.
Yeah, but this is not mostly about writing. It'll be better. It'll be much better. Here, you can leave your chairs there. We can just set up some of these other ones. Or bring water.
You got water over there too.
Yeah, I suppose those sprinklers will go across the wire.
I got super excited with the pop and thought it was sparkling water.
This is going to be so much more fun. Everybody can see us in the room.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I did dress up for the occasion.
Me too.
This is our pre-conference attire.
I know. I had to put this dress on. This is my I want to have fun on Sunday dress.
This is Mennonite clergy clothes, in case you're wondering.
I like it. I like it. Well, you don't learn. I don't know about you. We do like.
Okay, this is your water, I
Oh.
think. This is my water.
Okay, so now how is the broadcast looking with all the people in the picture?
It's looking better. I'm just trying to make sure they can really see it, because as far as I can tell, it's live, but I haven't.
This is very high.
We gotta talk to them. That's the. And
It'd be nice if we could see that.
it would be really nice if we could see them, but we can't.
No, I don't want to see and talk to them, because if people aren't wearing headphones, you hear sound back.
So
You can only do it if you're wearing headphones.
do they have a way to ask the question?
If they text me a question.
Oh, nice.
We see you, they said. Super. We could, once we're done in person, if we want to try to go live with the people on here, we can try, but I would prefer to do it in the room, because this is complicated for me. I'm trying to learn how to do this,
Totally.
participate. And we are grateful.
And we need to learn how to. We need to do this too. All of us need to learn how to do
Yeah,
this.
we got a couple things going on.
Move into the not having to use fossil fuels to.
Yeah, totally.
I pushed my org in the state to learn how to do this stuff. So Ohio's good on our Google Hangout. I did not expect to take it national.
Did you guys get stuff over here? Papers.
No, there were papers.
Go grab some papers.
Oh, you got a
Or
paper.
should we give out the papers at the time when we give out the papers?
I
We'll
think
give out
we
the
should.
papers.
We don't need it.
Yeah, never mind. Don't get the papers. We're gonna.
Too late, I'm getting the papers. I've already moved.
You've already moved. Get the papers.
I'm getting the papers.
Are we waiting for anybody else in person?
We think so, but I didn't get a really big RSVP. I had a lot of people say yes, they were coming on that thing before I said, should I send you a check? Everybody said, of course I'll be there. So I was estimating 10 people.
Okay.
But this
Bodies
is
in the
not-
room?
Yeah,
5 of us.
yeah, so there's 5 of us. So there's 5 people who are potentials, but, okay, so the question is, I wonder if there's anybody who might not know where the room is.
I made a sign. That doesn't mean that everybody would see the sign. It's at the front desk.
Cool.
I don't know how many other towels we do. Unless we knew who it was.
Okay.
we thought, and then we
You want to get really,
Go down.
really started?
could ask the front desk to call those places.
Say it again.
If we had an idea of who it was, then we could ask the front desk to call their room.
Yeah, no, I don't think
Makes
so.
sense.
So I think that, I know that Huda wasn't gonna be here.
Oh, man.
And I wasn't sure if Peter was gonna be here or not.
These are really, we're probably gonna drive people really through the wall with all of this. I'll try not to do it.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
So,
Okay, so who's on?
so I know that people in Ohio are watching,
Okay,
perhaps
great.
more. We apologize, you can't read the white paper, but what it is an agenda. It says IPL Climate Conversations, Welcome and Introduction, Vision, Practice, Application, and Strategic Planning. So that's the agenda written on the board, and we're learning as we go.
I did, yeah.
And there's
Ask
a,
them,
yeah.
yeah, ask them if they got that email.
So hopefully everybody got an email that's a folder of many Google documents. When did you send your email?
Like a couple hours ago.
A couple hours ago.
And it's of what we printed out for folks who are here.
So I'll go up to the camera and show people some of what there's like.
Oh, you know what, we can show them when we,
Okay, stuff like this.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's coming through on the camera.
Do they know how to text you if they haven't?
Yes, I requested text for tech.
And we know that if I'm talking like this, they can hear us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I did a good sound check. If anything, I did a good sound check.
all right.
I have one question, Deb, not to throw any wrenches into this.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how much it's gonna be a burden if we did hear a little bit of a whoosh sound.
If we heard
If
them.
we heard them, I think we should try that, because I think that will, that the whoosh sound might be worth it. Because then we can all introduce ourselves, and, because it's important to have.
I've gotten text messages from my coworkers in Ohio that they're on. I see that there's 4 viewers.
Great.
Increase the sound on your end if possible. So,
Tammy says she's on and she got the folder.
great.
Yay.
All right, so this is where the microphone is. I got one note asking us to increase our talking sound.
Okay, yep. Deb, you're like a pro here. Thank you so much for making this happen.
And Alicia says we can hear you just fine, just can't see the papers though. Thanks for reading the agenda. So I think we're just gonna be committed to people texting me their
Okay.
questions or thoughts, because I can see that we have 4 viewers, but I can't see their cameras.
We don't need to see them, but if we could hear them, it would be great. I'm just thinking about going around the circle and introducing ourselves. It's okay, I mean, it's okay. If we can begin. You know, one of the limitations of this day is that this is a lot of interaction. So we're excited that some of you are together in Wisconsin, sitting in a circle in your own living room, I think, or in your office. Tammy, I know you're by yourself, and is there somebody in Cleveland who's not with others?
For Ohio, we've got 2 folks in Cleveland,
Great,
Alicia and Marty.
great,
And then our directors in Columbus, Sarah Ward.
got it. So Sarah, you're by yourself and Tammy's by yourself. We should make sure that Sarah and Tammy have each other's phone numbers, and that they maybe can be communicating. If we have breakouts to have conversations, they can talk to each other on the phone. That might work.
Sure.
So we can just do that out loud right now. So, or maybe can they text questions to each other on that Google Hangout?
I think there's a way to hit the chat function on the right.
Okay, so those of you guys who are chatting, can you chat with each other? And especially Tammy and Sarah, if you guys can make sure that you have each other's phone numbers. We would love to be able to make sure that you all have a chance to ring each other up when we have opportunities to do pairing off. Does that sound good?
Sure. And the last tech thing, if people have any questions, it's in the email.
And Sarah Webb is on
Okay.
too. from
Great.
Iowa.
So feel free to text me if you have a question, 614-323-1703. Again, 614-323-1703.
Yay!
One of the wonderful things about this work that we're doing is that it seems like what I learn is always different from what I thought I was going to learn in any particular thing. So maybe what we're going to learn today is how to deal with creating community through, you know, a webinar.
Yeah.
I think we've done pretty well on the phone, but it's been short conversations, and I always find it interesting to sort of imagine a circle, and then, you know, here we are in a real circle, but with some people missing, which is sad. So we have seats for all of you here in this very fancy boardroom. So just imagine yourself with us in person. Okay, so let's begin. Should we do that?
We should.
Okay. And at any point in which there are needs to be engaging in the technology, we'll just take a time out and fix what we need to fix, and then we'll get back to it. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I think that technology is good to go. I'm sorry I can't patch through to hear people at the moment.
You know, we'll take a break in a little while, and maybe we can do a little more of that. But I bet if you put that down, it'll be okay.
So yeah, on our agenda, I think we're going to do the welcome and invocation now.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to just welcome everybody here and say, Erin and I are really excited because the more we grow into the conversation model in Minnesota, the more we learn about the work that we're doing. And it's always new and different, and it's evolved a lot. So we're excited to have a much bigger group of people doing this so we can learn what's working in your places and really grow this to something that will be maybe useful even all over the country. So it's a huge opportunity for us, and we feel grateful to Reamp and really happy to be doing that in all these places. But one of the things we want to do is we really want to coordinate among organizations so that we can have some smooth ways of communicating what is really successful and what is not, and how it is that we can, you know, make this tool even better. So let's start with our invocation.
Yes.
Erin.
Yeah, our Claire Kern, our campaign manager, is the one who brought this Parker Palmer quote to us, and I just love it and feel like it connects with what we're trying to do, which is to really honor the ecosystems, both socially and environmental, in our world. He says, as I learn more about the seed of true self that was planted when I was born, I also learn more about the ecosystems in which I was planted, the network of communal relationships in which I was planted, the network of communal relationships in which I am called to live responsibly, accountably, and joyfully with beings of every sort. Only when I know both seed and system, self and community, can I embody the great commandment to love both my neighbor and myself.
Okay, so what we want to do is we have separated the agenda into three sort of sections. I'm off, this is a really small group. We've got some people online. We're always willing to be adapted as it makes sense in terms of how, you know, we can best spend our time together. I feel like, you know, the five of us have all had many years of experience working in these communities and have a lot to throw into the center of the circle. So we thought it would be, and I want to just say one more thing, which is that sort of as Erin and I think back on our 2014 year and how the climate conversation tool has played into our work, it's clear that it's really been transformational in helping us to change the sort of our own worldview about the way that we are operating within the faith community in Minnesota and the sort of the approach that we're using. But we're also pretty humble about the fact that it's really only a tool and it's used in many ways, and that in fact it's a tool at the service of an overall philosophy that has been growing and changing and developing. So anyway, so we're really curious to hear and see how you guys have used it. So we wanted to start, and we wanted to have an opportunity for each of us to introduce ourselves and a little bit about not the vision for the climate conversations tool, but more importantly, what, you know, our broader intention for our organizations are. So the idea is that if we can sort of articulate what be able to go back and think about, you know, how it is that this is useful in our context. And then we want to just talk about barriers and bridges, like what are the real things that have been working and haven't been working in the broader chapter. I don't have a watch on me, but there's a clock back here. It's 25 after right now, so we were just gonna do this maybe for another, 25 minutes, half an hour. We were gonna talk about our vision and the sort of barriers and bridges that we're experiencing. And then we're gonna turn to the climate conversation, sort of dissecting the model. Does that sound fine? Okay.
Sounds fine to me, but we already talked about it.
That's right.
You're like, it sounds awesome.
You're like, Julia, good job.
Yeah.
That's,
Um,
how does that play into this up here?
This is just our vision, like what are our visions
For that
Yeah.
particular section?
for that particular subject. So the next thing we're gonna do is we'll practice a little bit with the model, debrief it a little bit, and then talk about, and this is where we can maybe, intentionally get people to, maybe they can even email questions and thoughts on a document and we can look at the computer or something like that. But everybody can, throw in their own questions and we can sort of workshop issues that we're having. And then we're gonna talk about how we help congregations and faith groups move from the conversation tool to their strategies.
And kind of, and we're gonna talk about that, and then also to strategize together about how can climate conversations be used in service of your longer term goals and vision.
And we'll take a few breaks and okay.
Can we put end times for each of these sections, just so we can have a sense of pace?
Yes, we have already got impact, so why don't I just write them up there?
Although we didn't plan on starting at
Yeah, but I think
half an
that
hour after.
Could we do a quick round of intros? of
we
who
will
we
do
are?
that. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so we will do this right as we start to do.
Okay.
So we'll be done with this by 3 o'clock. And then we'll do some practice for the next hour, and this is 4 to 5, and we'll try to get some break. So that's basically.
Great.
Okay.
And just so I know, what
Yeah.
time does dinner start?
I don't know what time does dinner start. Susan, you
6.
always know everything.
6.
Yes,
Okay.
but I would like a chance to go
Yes.
outdoors before then.
Absolutely. So let's do introductions, and I'm wondering if, as we do introductions, we can just each of us say a word or two about what the vision. We were going to do pair shares, but it seemed ridiculous because there's 5 of us. So I think we're not going to do that. We can just,
The pears are delicious.
pears are so delicious, and we could do like
We
apples,
would like to share
or
them.
aren't there like
That's so
apple
cute.
pears?
I never thought of it that way. That's so cute.
I'm sorry, I'm a little sleep deprived.
Okay,
Sounds good.
so can I just name the fact that this is like, it's great, but it's a little awkward because you guys are like, first of all, it's awkward because we have all this technology and we love you out there. But it's also, we're doing a workshop that we often do with people who are, haven't been doing this forever. So again, if you have things to throw in here in terms of how this agenda works, what you really want to get out of this, maybe we could just spend, is there something that we're missing here, I guess, is what I'd be curious to know.
I'm catching up to. We have not ran a climate conversation yet in my state.
Yep.
So
We haven't either.
Okay, so I was seeing this sort of as I couldn't figure out if we were going to actually do a climate conversation or for a training, but I think you've kind of spelled out well that we've done our welcome and invocation. Soon we'll do individual welcome.
Yes.
But the idea is we'll spend about 30 minutes talking about what our vision is for climate conversations, and then 3 to 4 p.m. we'll do a practice climate
Yes.
conversation. Okay, and then we'll debrief that at the end.
Yes. Sweet. Okay, so let's do some intros. So I'm going to just say who I am, and I'm going to talk a little bit about one of my hopes and dreams for the Minnesota. And we can be using the board, or maybe we shouldn't use the board because everybody online can't see it. I don't know.
I think if you want to use the board for the folks that are here in the flow, then you should use the board.
Okay.
I'm happy to write stuff too.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So I want to say so maybe we can each just talk a little bit about how long we've been in IPL and what are, a little bit about what we are hoping.
Hoping, like in general, right? I know that when we talked about this,
Yes.
the idea was we want to get big and where are we headed, as individual chapters and as a larger organization. And then to go down into the climate conversations and then consider how those climate conversations can help us move us toward that vision. Is the
Yes.
idea. Are
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
feeling that still
Yeah, I think
live?
that's good.
Okay.
Okay, so, so one of the things, one of our board members asked me about a year ago, and she said, Julia, tell me, in 5 years, if Minnesota IPL is as successful as you are imagining it, what will it look like? And, what will be happening? So I'm gonna say that. So, I've been at Minnesota IPL since, March of 2013. And so I've been just a little bit more than 2 years. And when I think about Minnesota IPL in 5 years and the climate movement, what I would like to see is thousands of congregations around the state and faith communities that are congregation-less who have created a culture in which climate is sort of fundamental to the way that they think about justice or morality. So that, and in order to get there, I feel like the vision is that in each of these, thousands of communities that will have some really thoughtful leaders, people who are able to articulate what it is that they want to do in terms of taking action, have the resources and the network connections in order to be able to plug in, to be able to be successful at public policy actions and doing things within their communities that are practical and have integrated some of the climate story into their worship services, and so that it becomes sort of a part of the culture. Yeah. So I think that you all can, start to either say different visions or second and add as you move forward. Brian, you want to go?
Sure.
So introduce yourself first to all these folks.
I'm Brian. I'm a Mennonite minister, and I work at Faith in Place, Illinois Interfaith Power and Light, out of Chicago. I've been with Faith in Place since 2009. I did policy work for years, and then recently became the executive director. And in 5 years, we have lots of goals in our strategic plan. I think relevant to this, we have 3 office locations in Illinois, so Champaign, Urbana, Chicago, and then up north in Waukegan. They look very different in 5 years' time. And what we found from that is that staff hired locally who know the neighborhood community really help us enact our overall vision of faithful people caring for the earth together. We want to have 5 office locations across Illinois in 5 years. And our program areas just really humming along with green teams at partner congregations, doing energy and climate, water preservation, sustainable food and land use, and advocacy programs really greatly and awesomely. Building this amazing movement in Illinois. Faithful people caring for it. That's what we talk about. Caring for the earth. Our people of faith caring for the earth.
I get the advocacy, sustainable land use, conservation,
So yeah, energy and climate,
energy and climate.
advocacy, sustainable food and land use, and water preservation. But that's, yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
Yeah, and I heard in that too, it made me excited about the hiring locally based on, who's there and
Yep.
the unique story of that community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be Tammy for a minute
Yeah.
because she sent hers. So Tammy with Lutheran Advocacy in Minnesota. And their vision is to build citizen advocates throughout the state. Obviously, she says mostly from Lutheran churches. We want them to be advocates on care creation as well as hunger and poverty issues. There is a portion that is foundation forming or the converting or transforming of people to understand that these concerns are important. So that's Tammy.
And then where's Tammy from?
Lutheran Advocacy in Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I had to put on a different hat, just be a different person hat.
Yeah.
Oh, and she says she's been there since January of 2014. And before that, many of us know she was at Bread for the World for almost 19 years. So,
Yeah.
that's who she is. Okay, now I'm going to be me just for a moment.
So you gotta look slightly at this.
Hi.
Not a,
Susan Guy with Iowa Interfaith Power and Light, and Sarah Webb is hanging out with us as well. So there are two of us on today. So Iowa IPL, in fact, it's interesting we're doing this because we actually have a planning meeting at the end of May where we're going to actually set some new goals because we had done some strategic planning a couple of years ago and we're sort of in a new place organizationally. So we're really where Sarah is now full-time with us, which is new, which is fantastic. And we're in the process of hiring an organizer to do some work and a part-time communications person. So we're growing, our organization is growing, which is fantastic. So, you know, our mission statement is to engage and equip people of faith to become leaders in addressing the environmental and social justice consequences of climate change. So that's
Nice.
that is the mission statement, and like really everything that we do is focused on that. Everything comes back to the issue of climate change for us. So every issue that we work on, our two programs that we run, Cool Congregations and our Food, Faith, and Climate program, we have a speakers bureau as well. And so the climate conversations model fits really well for us right now, especially as I look at what's going on advocacy-wise for us. And there are really two big things that we are engaged in advocacy-wise right now. One is the Clean Power Plan, and this really the state implementation planning process for that. So that is one big piece of what we do, and we're really trying to ramp up the public support for that. And the other thing, obviously, well, it's obvious to me, maybe not to you, is the Iowa caucuses and engaging presidential candidates on the issue of climate change. And we are part of a campaign that is specifically focused on engaging Republican and conservative presidential candidates on the issue. So we're not preaching to the choir. And I think for us, as I look at the climate conversations model, it is about how we meet people where they are and have constructive conversations about solutions that aren't alienating to people who are maybe coming from a very different viewpoint than, you know, our traditional presentations where everyone who's sitting in the room is already on board on the issue. So I think this will be a really helpful model for us for that.
so in 5 years, then you would really like to see people in congregations, Republicans and Democrats alike, communicating and co-creating solutions.
Yes.
Love it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Deb Steele. I'm an outreach coordinator for Ohio Interfaith Power and Light. And earlier when we did intros, I didn't catch that our other consultant, Chris, is hanging out with Sarah in Ohio.
Yay.
Hanging out, watching this. So thank you to everybody for being so thoughtful of how we start the room conversation and as we go through this adventure of doing the online thing. So our organization is focused on a religious response to climate change through energy efficiency and education. So we help a lot of places of worship get energy efficient and at the same time try to take that to the pews of encouraging home energy audits. So, you know, I don't know if I can jump right into the 5-year vision yet, but we're hoping through climate conversations to keep the to make it more broad within a congregation rather than it getting isolated within a green team.
Beautiful.
But a lot of times a green team has a nice start or splash to their activities. Then sometimes we wait a little bit too long for a level 2 energy audit to be completed. And then it gets a little too technical for the environmentalists to stay on top of the results of that energy audit. So we're hoping climate conversations help keep the conversation more broad, involve more people, and hear all the awesome solutions that are already underway, the local food that's already happening. We were brainstorming about doing this in an area just north of my city that I live in, that happens to grow food, the MTSO, method, got up too early, I can't remember the acronym. But they're growing food in that place, seminary. So we're thinking as we plan possibly a woman-based climate conversation, to work with the folks that will be in that room about what kind of food they'd like to have on the menu. Not that we're gonna go all out and have an enormous, wonderful meal, but at least to be culturally sensitive to have the right kind of food and that food be grown on site. So that's a very specific vision, but the idea is don't get depressed and in the corner because climate change is a big issue, but let's celebrate. Here's a salad you requested, and a lot of it was actually grown on site. So that's a very specific vision of how we'd like to just pull off the climate conversation. But in 5 years from now, we would like to have helped possibly maybe 100 to 200 churches have done energy efficiency stuff.
Yeah, and I love this idea that the energy efficiency stuff is nested in an approach that honors other parts of their lives and that groundedness of the food system.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Erin.
Yes. So my name is Erin Pratt, and I'm with Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light as the program director. And I'm looking at what Julia said because she and I have done a lot of talking and dreaming about this. So I'm right on board with that. About that, it seems like there's such an opportunity for faith communities to broaden their sense of identity to include working towards climate justice, towards it. I mean, it just makes sense. We were just out in southern Minnesota at Gustavus Adolphus College, which is a small liberal arts school. And we had a community and student gathering. And one of the professors there is working with us, and she had her students do research about denominational and faith statements about climate change. And people were just astounded, about how much has already been developed, how much is already there, that people are articulating that this is the issue of our time as people of faith to be working on. So I would add to that youth, through faith communities are deeply engaged, and I'm so always heartened by how solution focused they are. And I had 2 people who participated in the Youth Be the Spark do a workshop for other youth, and they came up with like 6 different solutions, thought thinkers, thought people who are all under the age of 18 around the world, coming up with ways to be sustainable. And just, so I think there's so much vitality there. And that the intersection of racial equity, economic justice, environmental justice, climate change, that we continue to really strengthen the way that we work towards solutions to uplift all of those things, so that we're working with lots of communities.
Yeah.
Successfully.
Beautiful. All right. So there's some folks on the.
Feel free to text me your vision, but before we leave the vision, I thought it'd be helpful to read through.
Yeah. What
And
I
I
do
would
that?
Can we take a picture
Certainly.
of it and then send it to the list
You know,
as we go, so that folks could look at
Let's.
that?
I don't know that we want to try to do too many things as we go, but let's definitely take a picture and we'll put this all in the.
Super not hard to
Yeah.
do though.
Is it?
It's
Well-
like, I do it all the time.
I'll take a picture and text it to the people that have texted me. But
Oh, perfect.
Your person has texted me.
I don't know.
Oh,
All
excellent.
the people that are on the phone are people that are on our email
I
list.
mean, I wrote what you all said, so,
Maybe to brag about our active listening skills.
okay, I will go for it.
Julia said 1,000 congregation communities, cultural identity around climate justice, leaders and resources to be successful, robust approach, and climate stories. Brian, Faith and Public Life, Illinois, Mennonite, there's 3 offices, 5 offices, so you're planning on growing. Green teams, water conservation, energy and climate advocacy. sustainable. And then Tammy, who's not here, but texted her thoughts in. She's in Iowa, Minnesota.
Close
Movement
though.
Advocacy, there
Right
it
next
says,
door.
and then, citizen advocates throughout the state, climate, hunger, poverty, how people begin to see these as important. And then Susan, who's here from Iowa, they're growing, they're getting an organizer, part-time communications person, big meeting at the end of May. There's gonna be full-time tools, act on climate card, act on
Cool congregation.
CCs,
Cool
congregation and impacts.
You know what? I'm gonna stop you just for a second. I think it's okay not to read
Everything.
all of it, but I just can I just point out a few themes that I see throughout this we've already do this. Hold on just one second. I
Just
wanna-
correct my spelling. Mennonite. So sorry.
Mennonite.
M-E-N-N.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, there we go.
I wouldn't even know, I'm horrible.
If you just go like this, then it will be
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
Mennonite,
Yeah,
right?
that makes sense.
I'll always remember how to spell it now.
Okay, that's right. Okay, what I see is some themes: growth, new connections, opportunities for not only Republican voices, conservative voices, youth voices, voices of historically marginalized communities, communities of color, to come into the movement in graceful ways. Really thinking about, how do we ground some of the work in energy efficiency in a way that is more vibrant, like bringing salads that are grown on the place. How does that look? So incredible goals, I think. I'm going to move on, and we'll just spend about 10 minutes talking about, what are the ways in which, I guess this is a barriers and bridges conversation. So where have we found? What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over, and then I'm going to,
That's efficient.
yeah, just so that we have, well, maybe not.
It'll be.
Yeah, never mind. Okay, put that down. Okay, so let's just talk about barriers and bridges to reaching some of these goals that we have discovered in our work.
And folks are texting to me diversity, and I think specifically racial diversity in this work.
Absolutely. So I'm going to just move over here, all of you, and put that right on this vision sheet.
We're writing down diversity on the vision sheet.
Okay, excellent. Okay. I messed up bridges just for you.
Thank you so much.
So you would feel right at home. I would spell a very easy word wrong. I thought so.
Yeah.
Okay, so for real, what's going on? Why have we not already gotten all of these things achieved? Since probably we would have said all the same things 3 years ago. What's getting in our way?
I would say fear for some people might be getting in the way. I know that got in the way for me personally in 2005, and Convenient Truth was overwhelming to watch and digest. So sometimes fear is holding back communicating all the awesome solutions that are already happening.
Okay, so it's this sense of overwhelm
Yeah,
holds you back from your full potential to communicate.
sure.
Okay.
If I get too carried away on the parts per million in the atmosphere, which it's great that we know some climate scientists.
All right.
Myself personally, I get a little overwhelmed, so.
Okay, so sometimes it's actually the facts and figures that are overwhelming.
Yeah, almost an information overload on talking about how big the
absolutely.
climate change crisis is.
Excellent. What else? And this, by the way, can be personal, or it can be institutional, or it can be political. I think that there's a lot of things in the sort of organizational life of, the way that we run things in nonprofits or in the U.S. that are getting in the way. There's also a lot of personal barriers I have, and there's barriers in our faith institutions. Anyway, but that is fantastic.
Just to add,
Yes.
the way I think Deb was articulating the way I articulated it is like the scale of the problem really overwhelms me. And I find it paralyzing in ways.
I would say even an apprehension to engage in politics.
Mm.
Places of worship need to remain nonpartisan. So there's sort of been a like hands off sometimes when it gets to voter reg cards or candidates' positions on issues.
Okay, so when we think about worship and we think about politics,
They-
those things don't
Yeah.
mix. Got it.
I think people being very busy and having so many demands, on their time, and there's so many urgent, often when I hear people say, there's so many urgent issues.
It's been challenging for me in the past several months. There's been so much incredibly powerful public space created around Black Lives Matter in Minnesota. And I really want to engage in that full out because it's been exciting to watch how that energy has emerged and how it's been really powerful. At the same time, I also have to go home and write my grants and be with my children and do all that stuff. So just the demands on our time as we think about these multiple movements, is intense. What else? What other things are getting in the way? I do want you to think institutionally as well. How do we do business that gets in the way?
I would say overcoming maybe past hiccups.
Okay, tell me
One
more.
particular church accidentally mowed over their herb garden.
Mm.
So there's sort of a fear that, getting the herb garden going was really difficult. Maybe there was a wave of volunteers that managed it, or a sweet intern was there and she did it all, but she's gone now. So kind of acknowledging, a lot of people have been caring about the environment. Maybe we're recycling already, or the recycling went awry, we can keep recycling. So acknowledging the past efforts that we started to go down and why that didn't work, and it's okay, that the plants will grow back. So rather than saying we tried that, it didn't work, let's look into why it didn't work, and should we try something else, or could we try the herb garden again? And my mother too doesn't know the difference between cilantro and basil. It's okay.
Interesting.
Just address it.
Yeah. And I think I imagine you can think of a lot of examples similar to that. It's a beautifully metaphorical sort of way to think about those hiccups. I think that there's a lot of stories within many of our congregations that have to do with, I imagine that beyond the story of the herb garden being mowed over, there's probably a story of different camps within the congregation, those who cared about the herb garden and those who didn't. And then there's stories about what those who aren't involved in the herb garden are involved in and why that may or may not be more important. So all of these historical narratives that have to do about placing meaning on social action or on sort of the way that we identify ourselves. These are really powerful narratives that are present in our institutions. I would say both in our IPL chapters and our IPL national organization, as well as in our congregations. So it's been super interesting for me to sort of stand up in the balcony and say, wow, what are the narratives that are getting in the way of this particular group being well? And maybe it's, man, that heart feelings over that mowing of the herb garden is like, it's hard to overcome that anger, or whatever it is, that has stopped that story. What else?
I think the way that we communicate can be a huge barrier because, I think about early on when I started at Iowa IPL in 2010. And, one of the things that, we keep emphasizing sort of at our national level and sometimes at the state level is this language of caring for creation. And what I found out is that using the term creation is a problem for some of the faith communities that I work in. And so that was, kind of a wake up right there to think more specifically about how we communicate. And now that's translating very clearly to the work that we're doing and working with conservatives. Because, I think we have this idea that like, if I just say it the right way, then they'll say, of course it's a problem, and I agree with everything that you've put in front of me as a solution. And that just is not, it's not accurate. And the truth is, we have very different ways of thinking about solutions. We have very different ideologies to overcome. It doesn't mean we can't find common ground, but we have to do it carefully. And I think that the idea that if I just tell you the problem and now how I'm going to solve it and you're going to agree with me is the way to go about it is just, it is a barrier. It creates a barrier where
Prescribing solutions.
Right.
is a barrier.
right.
I'm just gonna put the word prescription, right, is in and of itself a problem. One of the things I do a lot of thinking about is, how is the sort of Western worldview that we are in certain, like many of our faith traditions have emerged from, how is that a fundamental barrier to this greater goal of, having more diversity of intention, and of course, prescription is by definition saying that one sort of narrative or identity is the right answer and another way is the wrong answer. And of course, that comes really into play when we're dealing in the middle of the night, all of us, with this sense of overwhelm when we think about what the data says, because of course there is a hard stop of chemistry and physics that is real, right? So, we're not all, completely relativists about this. We want to understand different people's identities and different people's ideas about solutions. At the same time, we're dealing with a physical problem. So how do we deal with that tension in our own work, in our own hearts?
We have something here from Tammy.
Tammy, yay!
I was gonna say, maybe we could tell folks if they
Yeah, feel
wanna
free to text me your question.
Yeah, Ohio folks,
Barriers
we're
and-
hoping to,
barriers right now.
Tammy.
Tammy says, she has 6, I'll just say. That feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of the problem, which we talked about the scale of the problems. In Minnesota, a desire to get along.
Nice, Minnesota nice.
All right, I'm just gonna put, the nice problem.
Yeah.
Nice.
We don't have that.
Iowa
Is
nice.
I know that people don't mind just
Doesn't
saying it.
exist.
Iowa nice is a problem too. Partisan politics. That there's no easy deadline, that we can't say we'll do X and we'll be finished by December.
Oh.
So that contributes to the overwhelmedness of people.
Keeping our steps measurable.
That we don't understand the full impact right now or connections to other issues. So for example, she says, if we focus on climate, we're taking away from work on poverty. That they have a bishop that's stuck in that mode. So I think helping to connect the dots, and then that the solutions will cut jobs.
Absolutely.
That just sparked a lot of things for me.
Yes.
The rumor that it's one or the other, when really it's both or none.
Gosh, yes.
That's well said. What are the
Blue green
barriers?
lines.
Yeah, both and.
It's
Instead
not
of either
jobs
or.
or the environment. It's both or none.
Right. And then, of course, the hard stop of 24 hours a day where I do have to decide whether I'm going to go to the Black Lives Matter march or finish my IPL grant.
Or just have a nice dinner.
Or just
Something
have a nice
crazy
dinner.
like that.
The reality is,
The barrier of having to say no to people when they ask you to do something that you sometimes can do and sometimes don't want to do.
That's right.
I mean, I have a hard time with saying no, and sometimes I just need to because I'm running on fumes.
Totally.
I'm gonna throw
Yes, more.
my biggest barrier, I think, is lack of respect. And the way I think about that is when Faith in Place shows up, people don't take us as seriously as I'd like them to. And I think that's tied to the funding question. A lack of funds means it's hard to show up and really have an impact. It also means it's hard
Who
to
is not,
generate.
who are what's the agency of, what's the
So I think
agency
it's
of lack of
I think
respect?
it's everybody, the population in general. Whether you're talking to politicians, you're talking to churches of a wide variety of sorts. I feel like little miracles happen every day. It's amazing, but nobody knows about them. And so it also has to do with branding. I also think it has to do with communications,
Right,
marketing.
that's good.
Yeah.
But I just find that that's the barrier I try
Yeah.
to fix every day.
So branding, communications,
Marketing, funding. I mean, all that's kind of
being able to
institutionally.
show up places.
But I think that has to do with I could deliver 1,000 petitions to a legislator the legislator will get up in front of a rally of 500 people, 250 of whom are Faith and Police people. The legislator will still think Sierra Club. You know, because it's a branding, it's a marketing, it's like all that sort of thing.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought it up to the institutional level, because now you've just like set me.
Okay.
You really said, I'm like, it's really challenging because what we have is, you know, even though you have 3 offices around the state and totally have a presence, a lot of the work that we do is relational. And by the way, this Climate Conversations is getting all of you more in the hole of doing relational work, which will get you less respect from some and absolutely brilliantly bringing people into the things. So that's why I wanted to know who is not respecting. What we're finding is that we get a lot of respect from people within these communities that we're working with, and get, you know, likewise ignored by a lot of other bigger greens, or so that becomes frustrating, because we feel like, in the same way, that there's, you know, when we look around at a rally and we know 2/3 of the people, you know, and everybody thinks Sierra Club, it's kind of a bitter. So, and that doesn't happen all the time in Minnesota, but it's a real tension, I think.
Right, I like you pointing towards what we can, I mean, that's already pointing towards what we can do. But, you know, when you think about branding and communication and marketing, what are the resourceful ways that we can bring in experts to help us with that?
I have a couple things that have been really present for me, and is sort of set off by this. One is a sense, sort of I guess I feel like we're operating in a metric-based world in which the kinds of things that are valued are not the kinds of things that are helping to build our real relationships. So I guess if I was to write it, I could squeeze it in here, something about transactional rewards. I think those are a real barrier to this idea that we have an abundant solutions, and I'm not clarifying why it's opposite, but sometimes, you know, getting one signature, you know, whatever, getting the number of signatures is the opposite of really deeply building relationships, and that gets in the way sometimes. So, yeah, okay, so let's take another 5 minutes. Is that fine, Erin?
For the bridges?
Yeah. We were supposed to be done at 3, but since we started at 2:30.
Yeah, I'm not saying, but.
Yeah. So, okay, so this is not just about climate conversations. This is also about what do we do to deal with. So, as for those of you guys who are not able to read the whiteboard, to sum up what we've been.
She's just texting.
Oh,
Exactly.
You got some?
I sent them a photo of it.
Oh, good. Okay, so just to sum up just a little bit though, we have personal level barriers, our own sense of overwhelm, our own busy lives, our sense of running on fumes, and the tension that exists in building small organizations to powerful state presence. That is, so, you know, we take the personal sort of pressure of having to serve a large population. I have to tell you this short story. So Becky, who's in Vermont, is it Becky? Yeah. She was, we were talking about how many staff we had, and she was like, well, I'm just one half-time staff person. She's like, but we only have 608,000 people in Vermont. So we're smaller than Minnesota. I'm thinking to myself, well, you should be able to do that, one half staff for 608,000 people, you know. So anyway, that, you know, personal sense of overwhelm, but, you know, not only with the data, but also with the work. But then we have in broader society some social norms about politics and religion. Erin's father is a Presbyterian pastor. He has a lot to say about this. That it shouldn't be a problem, but in fact it is. But a lot of the narratives that we have even within our own communities about what people's identities are. Either you're a green person or you're a social justice person, that story is out there. Some stuff about the words that we use. You know, how are we messaging? You know, if we do have a really organized toolbox who is not represented in that toolbox. So if we're looking for a diversity of voices and a really transformational movement that involves youth and marginalized communities that haven't been at the table, how do we do that with an existing sort of very well-crafted messaging board if we don't know what's missing? Of course, all this stuff about no easy solutions and no end point, right? We're not going to solve the climate crisis. We have some job security in that. And then how are we seen by others? How are our organizations effective? Okay, so what can we do to
So my favorite bridge to the bridge
bridge to the bridge?
would be this notion of a prescription, particularly if we're going into a racial minority community, an economically deprived community, that I start with listening where this community is. I have some ideas of some really awesome solutions, paid for home energy audits. But before I start prescribing people, what we know are good solutions, people know when they're being talked at versus listening.
Perfect, beautiful.
So I'm excited about climate conversations because I think it really starts with listening, from what I can gather.
Beautiful. I'd love to figure out how to brand this idea in a way that this idea is what brings us respect rather than the number of energy audits we achieve, right? Because as we try to move really fast towards achieving 100 congregations who've had energy audits, does it push us past listening and into that transaction too fast? So how can we stop and have the metric be how many people did we listen to, not how many people did we, serve with?
Reducing consumption and at what rate?
Right.
And
we have a challenge in Minnesota. We have a grant from Hennepin County in the metro, and we're trying to, and we have an absolutely fabulous program administrator who totally loves what we're doing. But one of the things we have to do to please the board is we have to have calculated how many pounds of carbon were saved in each of the congregations where our youth worked. Anyway, so it's a challenge.
do you know an engineer?
Yeah, we should get some of the, we should just do we should do some modeling. Yeah. Okay, other bridges.
So I don't think listening is actually enough.
Sure.
So for Faith in Place, like if I go as a Mennonite white male with privilege to Waukegan, Illinois, and speak to a Spanish-speaking Catholic church, and I try to listen, it's going to be hard because my Spanish is really poor. But if I try to listen and I come with ideas, I'll be treated very politely. Things will go really well, but no behavior change will actually happen. You can almost guarantee it. The switch is if you hire up someone local and someone who's from the community and you work with them to train them, listening to them, and then making your programs appropriate historically, contextually, and so forth. And because the messenger really matters. And that's the proprietary secret that I'm sharing broadly with all of you because you're awesome. But the messenger totally matters. And the sooner you get to that, I really think it's a waste of time just to go and even to listen.
I agree with you. I've learned a lot over time that the messenger is actually more important than the message a lot of times.
Yeah.
And not being mad at human nature and saying, why aren't they listening to me? I know I'm not racist. It's just the reality of where humans are at. If we can identify a community leader or somebody on their way up to being a community leader and somehow give them a stipend or start to employ them, then we're working with the community and not talking at.
That's what I'm trying to say.
And I'm going to throw in there for me, having the flexibility to not only empower people, but to integrate something unexpected into our work. We have a solar project going on in North Minneapolis right now, and we're really excited about the fact that we're going to make sure that solar is accessible for low-income people to purchase. But unfortunately, they're not actually. That's not what they've been talking about.
What they've
been talking about is how they're going to create jobs. So we've pivoted, and now we're working on a workforce program because that's what the people in that community have brought to us. And so we're shifting our grant and we're putting the money into the workforce training. And that's so hard to do because we've got to get the institutions to agree to switch the grant money to do something else. And so listening, empowering, and finding the flexible space.
Not to get too
Making
specific, but
flexibility a cultural norm.
are you moving your jobs training to be installing solar panels or just?
We're funding a solar install job training program.
So it's still, there's a lot of overlap.
It's still about solar. It's still about, putting up a solar array in North Minneapolis. It's just
It's
less
sort of the
about
frame of jobs.
who gets to buy the solar and more about who's putting the solar,
Yes,
Yeah.
got it.
which wasn't what I thought would be most important, but totally what they wanted, so. So what else? We're gonna be done in just a couple minutes. Anything from the texting universe out there? Bridges.
A whole bunch of money. You tell my new executive director.
Bucket of money.
Okay, but seriously, how are we gonna hire people for real and treat people well if we don't have money, right? We do need to sell this idea. That's why Climate Conversations is kind of nifty that they've funded it, right? Although they've given us 50 cents compared to what they funded other things at, but we're so glad that you have $10,000. Can you do about that? We're having a workshop here. This isn't gonna be like going back to anybody's, because I don't like recording this, by the way.
It is recording, but I can kill the.
No, that's
Yeah.
okay.
And you
We
go
have a
on.
steering committee now, right?
It's just
I
a very,
actually am.
You are?
it's just a very real and
Yeah.
honest
Okay.
crux of the situation. We
Yeah.
care. We know we're in this for the long term. I have a background in union organizing
Mhm.
and economic justice. So I'm refreshed that places of worship do the long-term relationship thing,
Yep,
but it's been hard for me to figure out checking out the numeric to-dos, the
Mhm.
old-fashioned political organizing that I come from.
Yep.
So
yep. So what's the bridge?
I was just reflecting on what you were saying. I don't know. The honesty. I would say that somewhere in this empowering people, listening, flexibility, that this is a long-term effort and it's an honest-based effort, that we're going to be transparent about where funding sources come from. I mean, it matters a lot when you're the only paid person in the room. And if you're talking to an economically deprived community,
Yeah,
people say, why is she the one paid? And it's a fair question on their part.
totally. Yeah, I think that when it comes to branding and communications and marketing, we have to make this Climate Conversations campaign an incredible success so that we can market the relational organizing we're doing and turn that into jobs in local communities with local voices.
So I think as I look at that list, I think the key really to a lot of that is respect,
Mutual respect, like.
Yeah, mutual respect, but showing respect. So, the listening, the empowering people, the, finding the right message and the right messengers, and the transparency, that's all about respect. And, on the barrier side, I had talked about the ways we communicate can be a barrier. They can also be a bridge. They can be on both sides of that. But I think, we have to respect who we're working with on the other side of the table, which.
And not just personally, but institutionally.
Right.
Respect
Right.
somehow.
Yeah. There's a lot of ego stuff that gets in the way, both personal ego stuff and institutional ego stuff that gets in the way of our work. And that goes with working with partner organizations and all of that, and this idea of, do we want credit or do we want the win? I would always rather have the win than credit, and that's just the way, that I work. But
If you don't get the funding,
Yep.
then you can't keep having the participation.
So I want to just end this, and I do want to end it because I want to give us a moment to take a stretch break, and then we're going to go into the next part. But I want to say that one thing that has been incredibly powerful for me in terms of a bridge, and Erin and I talk about this all the time, we talk about telling a new story, one in which we don't have sort of a domination hierarchical worldview, but one in which we really think about how are we creating actualization and power and partnerships through partnership. So in that way, I'm always thinking about how can I come into a room with this, with the absolute conviction that we have abundance, that we have all the things that we need, and we need to be creative about finding them. And that has been overwhelmingly successful, I think. So just having an abundance-based. You're saying
And the way I've seen Julia do that multiple times is saying yes to something before we have the funding secured for it. And usually because it's a good idea or it's a really important person to invest in, or that when we then move forward with it, then the funding comes.
Yeah.
In spades.
and sometimes it doesn't because it didn't end up being as good an idea.
But it comes from
Oh,
somewhere
but
else. I mean, we've
yeah.
been okay.
So you're saying having a vision that it's possible?
Yeah, I mean,
Whatever
everybody
we're
wants
trying
to fund the winning team. So just believing that you're the winning team to begin with, and that's not a team, but it's it's been very helpful. I actually find that there's quite a bit of tension with, sometimes with, not only within the sort of partner environment, but also with the, when we start to worry about fighting over the scraps, it becomes so exhausting that I can't really believe in it anymore. But if I believe that we're gonna find it in a different place than we do. So, okay, let's take a break, just for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. We can run and get like coffee downstairs if we want. Should we do that? Do you want to take a break now?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
So
Okay.
we'll have a kind of climate conversation.
We're gonna
After the
do
break?
that. Yep, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go through a climate conversation.
Okay,
We're
we're
gonna
not gonna turn off the feed, but everybody, we're gonna definitely.
Yep, so we will be back here. Let's come back in 5 minutes, or does that sound good? 20 after?
Yeah, 20 after.
Great. All right.
Cool.
Yay! I do want to go down and get a cup of coffee when you walk down there.
Yeah, I can outside.
I'm not quite yet there yet. I'm my first bar. Better grease
Sounds really good. I'm only on my first bottle.
This is being recorded.
Yes, it is.
Oh, I like front and center too.
Awesome.
That is a lot good to hear.
do I think about it? Well, I was thinking we could ask guys to work on that one. So that we can- Yeah.
Dear future generations, I think I speak for the rest of us when I say, sorry. Sorry we left you with our mess of a planet. Sorry that we were too caught up in our own doings to do something. Sorry we listened to people who made excuses to do nothing. I hope you forgive us. We just didn't realize how special the earth was. Like a marriage gone wrong. We didn't know what we had until it was gone. For example, I'm guessing you probably know it as the Amazon desert, right? But believe it or not, it was once called the Amazon rainforest, and there were billions of trees there, all of them gorgeous. And oh, you don't know much about trees, do you? Well, let me tell you, trees are amazing. I mean, we literally breathe the air they are creating. They clean up our pollution.
clock you away.
Click, 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 click.
Okay. That was 5 minutes. I went outside and stood for like 2 seconds.
So Reno Steering Committee, you have all the power now, right? I tried to get on that.
All of
I
the
didn't
power.
campaign though. I think that was a mistake. I don't answer my phone when people call. It's the best of emails, so.
Well,
But you're on. You got appointed.
I got
And we
appointed
have a faith
like
person
2
on
weeks
there.
ago, and I think because there's nobody from Iowa on the steering committee, and there is no one representing
Muted.
faith.
There's
You
no
did
one from
mute it. Excellent. You did mute it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, so there's no one representing faith. So I think they were like, we'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Boom.
They
I
have
love
2 appointed positions on the steering committee. And so here, let's finish that off.
We gotta like cheers to the.
I know. I'm like, I have had a lot of liquid today. The person, I think, I'm trying to. Oh, there's an environmental justice person on the steering committee. That's the other appointed position.
Is it Antonio from Chicago? Or who
I
is it?
don't think so. I can't remember. Don't ask me. Oh, it's Shalini Gupta, I think.
Cool.
So, yeah, so they met like earlier this month, and then Scott like communicated with me and said, hey, we'd like you to do this. And I was like, okay.
Because you can't say no.
I can't say no to anything.
I think
I didn't know where to.
Brian-
I did the
Brian
I
muted
hit
the,
button, I think.
because we were chatting.
I was just wondering that. I was like, do you know?
This was good.
No, you didn't.
It does smell good.
It
The smell itself can wake you up.
Good.
What's that?
I drink it at a beautiful night.
You didn't mute it.
Oh, I didn't?
No.
I hit the little.
Would you really be up all night at
technology.
this hour? Drinking it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm old.
Yeah.
So let's
Don't
get
break the
started.
TV behind you.
And so
Because
we're
you're
all
in
rolling.
technology.
It's online, right? Okay, so we're gonna jump into the climate conversation part. And
Trying to ruin.
here's what I'm thinking. We're going to have a mini climate conversation, and then we're going to unpack it, and we're going to unpack it with a particular eye for conversations you've had, experiences you've had, that you have questions about, insights about, and so on, as we think about applying them. And so remember that in a climate conversation, we start with a story of connection. And then we go into, what do you know? How does it make you feel? How does our faith call us to respond? We're going to stop there and then debrief. And then the last section, we're going to be digging more into that action piece of the climate conversation, because it's so, we haven't gotten to do that really on our phone calls so far. And because we're really, when you have a little bit more time, you can flesh out the action section of the climate conversation and make it really useful in terms of getting people to apply what's happened and to move into the next steps for them in their community. So I think that when we debrief, we can refresh about the theories of change and some of the other tools we might be using, but now we'll just dive in. So I want to start today with the story of connection, particularly around nature. And so I'm going to share one of mine, and as you listen, just kind of sit with your own places in nature that are beloved to you or that you've experienced before, and see what might bubble up. And then we'll have a time to share a few of those stories together in the group. So I am living in Minnesota now, which is the land of thousands of lakes. But I grew up in Florida, in Northeast Florida, which is really the land of a lot of water, from oceans to marshes to rivers and lakes and springs. And luckily, my father's this Presbyterian minister, and my mother, this educator, and they're from Florida. And so every spare moment we were out on the water, usually on a motorboat. But when I was about 13, 14, we got a big sailboat that was capable of going across the wide ocean. And they had dreams to do that, but they got a fixer-upper, and it had all this teak wood on it. And it turns out that the mast was teak and nothing had been refinished or refurnished in decades. So we really spent our summer, instead of out on the water, we spent it in the marina. And when we were living in South Carolina, I did a report on manatees. And at that age, decided I was going to one day be a marine biologist because I wanted to know manatees. Well, it turns out that SeaWorld will take in injured manatees and rehabilitate them and then send them back off into the wild. And evermore, those manatees will have this kind of affinity or this openness to humans. And I wondered if this group of 3 or 4 manatees that always came into the marina were from SeaWorld, or like why? Because they would like to come up for the water, the fresh water, and come and drink it. And I just lived for those moments, just lived for them. Well, there were these big wooden rafts that people would use to get in and scrub the side of their boats. And one day I saw the manatees coming, and it just occurred to me, what if I could get on the raft and I could paddle out to them and be near the manatees? And so I tried it, and the first day they kind of let me close. And over the course of the summer, I developed this practice until one day I actually started being able to scrub them. And I was scrubbing their back. And then this one flipped over on her back, and she brought her little paddle, her little fins, and grabbed hugged my hand and started sucking on my hand, and actually it feels like a car wash. There's all these like scrubbers and whiskers and everything. It took my hand and sucked, and then let me out. And I thought that I had just died and like gone to heaven. I mean, it was like nothing could have been more special. And it was this experience of magic, and also just like I felt seen in a way that I don't think I ever had. So think about stories from your own life. Place in nature, interaction with nature. Take 20 seconds to do that. And I encourage people at home to do the same. And if you are someplace with other people, in a moment you'll have a chance to share that story. And if not, maybe to jot it down. I'll give you 20 seconds to think of your own, and then we'll do a short round. So when facilitating, we're always supposed to model what we want everybody to do. And I didn't quite do that. I spoke longer than I think we have time for everybody to speak in this circle. So I'll just say that, but I would love if people have a story that pops up, if you would like to share it with us.
Okay. So I grew up in Minnesota, and at UCC, and we had a church camp, Pilgrim Point, which is I think near Alexandria. So it personally thrills me that you guys kind of have a clue where Alexandria is. So really just the simplicity of waking up in a tent, or hearing, we had a motorhome and a tent, or hearing the rain on the roof of the motorhome in the morning. And a lot of families being nearby, camping, going out in the woods and hunting morel mushrooms. Couldn't have been a better way to be connected to nature. And with a congregation that's allowed me to be flexible on my perspective of God and energy, really got me deeply in tune to, I can't feel any closer to the universal consciousness and energy or God than being out in nature.
Thank you.
So I think for me, the moment that comes to my mind is going to Estes Park, Colorado, and I've been there several times, but this particular time I had gone with both my parents and my children, so it's kind of this interesting intergenerational experience. And so there's lots of chaos and people and stuff, but I one afternoon I went on a solitary hike on one of the trails, and just being out by myself and the beauty of the mountains, and then being near a lake at the same time and on this very quiet trail in nature, and just I think for me having the sense of the beauty of all of it, and this larger sense of how everything is in God, and I was in that too. I was just a part of it, and just the interconnectedness of nature and me and the sacred and all of it together was it's just beautiful. And I still just like, that's where I go in my head when I go to my happy place.
No pressure.
Or
No
you-
pressure. You can totally pass if you want.
No, I'll share a little bit. I grew up in Tremont, Illinois, central Illinois. I grew up in a very conservative Anabaptist tradition, so separate seating, King James Version, lay ministry had come into the women. And when you became a member of the church, you had to give up certain things. One of those was sports. I played sports a lot. So when I became a member of the church when I was 15, I also had all this time on my hands because I gave up football, baseball, basketball. And so I worked for a diesel mechanic, it was a farm community. But my other spare time I spent fishing. I took up fishing manually, and I think it's for this outdoors. So when I go to my spots, I think about fishing with Fritz, my border collie dog. Being out in nature is always.
Was there a particular river or particular?
So there's a particular farm pond.
Well, I'm debating which of my two places that I want to share. We have also an intergenerational community. It's in Michigan. It's called the Congregational Summer Assembly. And so I grew up there, being in this place every year of my life. And just remember two things about that. One is that every year when I was a kid and we would drive away, I would have this incredible ache in my chest. Like, I was leaving this like beloved place. And there's one place, there's many places that I think of when I can hardly choose what particular image to share with you about that. But we have this rambling, really dilapidated, but still very functional cottage. We call them cottages, not cabins, in Michigan. And so this cottage is, there's 2 bedrooms for all people, and there's no real walls. There's just partitions among the bedrooms. And so we're sort of forced to stay in a family. The family is forced to be on a schedule that is, respectful and related, because there's really no space for yourself. But on this cottage, there's this little screened-in porch where you can get away from the beautiful hum and hubbub of the family life. And on this porch, I would go there. There's a little day bed there. When it would rain, it was really, tremendous sort of almost rainforest like rain that would come down in this area right, less than half a mile from Lake Michigan. And so just being on that porch and smelling the rain, the smell of rain on the forest, and listening to the beating of the raindrops on the roof of this, and being away from all those people that I both just loved, but also just like you, Susan, needed to be able to be by myself. So I guess it was this combination of feeling really safe and also feeling liberated by being alone in this sort of chaotic rainstorm.
Thank you. Are you having communications to?
No, we're communicating fine. I'm
Okay.
just chuckling how family is wonderful and stressful.
So thank you for sharing. I feel like the kind of went to each one of those places as you shared them. And I want us to kind of move out of the stories a little bit just to look overhead and reflect for a moment on some of the themes that emerged about what we were connecting to. What were we connecting to in our stories?
I heard strong elements of the natural world being so in the natural world that we can't be distracted by screens and Google Hangouts.
Mm-hmm.
That it takes our full senses to be in that moment of seeing the view on the mountaintops or smelling the rain. It's
So
an
it's like-
immersion.
It's our present, like we really bring our presence, where the natural world invites our full attention.
You can laugh at me at being the Mennonite who points this out, but I heard a lot of themes of peace, of like people finding peace
Mm-hmm.
in the natural world.
So peace.
I know.
I was thinking too about like just the sensory experiences, you know, there's like seeing and smelling and hearing and, you know, all the sensory application.
I guess when I think about those raindrops, I think about that rain was so powerful. Just being there amidst this power that wasn't my personal power, but that I was totally immersed with.
And so you were connecting with the rain, but it was reflecting like a aspect of yourself.
Well, and it's just like the sounds and it was all something that I couldn't control. I didn't make the rain, I didn't choose the time, I didn't, but I could be mixed up with it nonetheless.
I think too that connection. I mean, the sense of like being connected to all of it.
Mm-hmm. So
Like we're not just like a separate being sitting here and here's nature, you know, like we're
yeah, like the
intricately,
manatee, like was hugging you.
we're intricately
Yeah.
connected to
Yeah.
it.
Yes. And I heard some, so I was connecting with the more than human world, and I heard other people saying that in terms of the fish and, the other animals. And then, let's see, what was I going to say? Oh, to self, to a sense of my own self or my own presence. And then I heard people saying they were connecting to the divine in some form or another.
Your own limits, right? Feeling your own lack of power.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And so we've touched on this in terms of the peace. What other feelings did we have that let us know that we were connected in these stories? What were the feelings, the experiences?
As I reflect on that rain and the power of the natural place in that same space, there's other times where I've been there and had the same experience, but it hasn't been in the context of the family being right there in the midst, but, and actually it feels really different. So I feel like I was connecting with my human family and all of the beautiful generations of community, even though they didn't share that particular moment with me. The fact that I wasn't concerned about them or like it was still totally, they were very much present in the peace that I felt because it's almost like they allowed me to be there in a different place.
Well, and you had other needs that had been met that made the solitude.
Yeah, I was already full of that sense of belonging. And that made a difference. I love your dog being one. Yeah, Fritz.
Just want to say his name.
I think the sense of of awe, you know, wonder that,
Adventure,
I mean, I heard that in your story, Erin, that like, you know, wow, you know.
Totally. Delight would be another way I would describe that, and I got tickled too. What other piece I'll bring over here?
Well, I suppose it's sort of this like moment that we can't predict is going to happen. You can't say, well, I'm going to climb to the mountaintop and have this amazing moment of
Right.
peace. So I'm going to, you know, when I wake up
I'm
tomorrow
going to have an
morning,
experience today.
it's like this intersection of once you do have time to calm down and take in the natural world around us, there's a miracle where we forget about our sense of self.
Yeah.
When I'm not limited by where my skin ends, but when I become connected to all of this that's happening around me, or your arm actually kind of getting half swallowed by a manatee, but that it's okay.
Yeah.
That you came out okay. That somewhere in that moment you lost your sense of self, and that's wonderful.
Yes. So if we're lost a sense of self, what did we gain? How would I write that?
Becoming, I guess,
Like a sense of oneness.
rather than, it's sort of like breaking your sense of consciousness and your stream of consciousness and breaking it into more observing and embracing being in the entire natural world around us.
It's like, and almost I'm hearing like not like a lot of words, or kind of like a
Right.
wordless kind of.
Meditation, I suppose. I don't know if I've ever done it. I could try.
I have Tammy.
Tammy has texted this.
I have Tammy. She says she grew up in Iowa, and about every 5 years they took a big vacation to see a part of the country. And for the intervening years, they went to Rocky Mountain National Park. And she loves the hike from Bear Lake to near Dream Lake to Lake Hiawatha. Lots of massive boulders and pristine cold glacier water. Loves sitting on a boulder in a little cave-like area, watching insects in the lake, listening to the birds, and feeling the breeze.
Oh, thank you, Tammy.
Yay, Tammy!
So, just very briefly, what were the things that we did that allowed those experiences to happen? It didn't mean that we made them happen, but what actions did we take that allowed them?
We got away. We made a decision to make that space.
I tried a new idea, and it was a little scary.
Yeah, you had to get on the raft.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a lead jacket?
I started swimming when I was like 1.5. The one was all free.
I guess that I had the benefit or the resources of my parents to be able to take us 2.5 hours north, and probably a few generations or a generation or two before me had bought that land for our church camp. So I benefited from, I'm saying some affluentness, not tons. It was a middle class experience, but I was lucky to have that time that my parents could take that at least weekend off with the family, and that
Tammy sent a picture.
the grandparents or so before us of our congregation invested the money to have that place of rest for our congregations.
I think intentionality too, you know, just, yeah, like you were saying, creating space. I mean, to be intentional about making the time. I don't know. I think you sort of meet the universe in that, you know, in that space.
Anything else? So we highlight this at the beginning of a climate conversation for a couple of reasons. One is to get in touch with what it is that we care about, something that we really care about in some shared experience that we have, some themes that emerge. It's to be together a little bit in that space. to get to know each other a little bit more. And also because when we are addressing climate change, it can be overwhelming and discouraging and full of despair. And that what we invite you to do is to kind of bundle these knowings, these feelings, and take them with us on the journey. And also to remember those actions that we can take that can support these feelings and those experiences that give us life and that give us nurturance. Because that's the point of living, but also because it can sustain our work. So we're going to turn to talking more about climate change. We're going to put this up so we can remember this. So what do we know? What do we know about climate change? Just popcorn style.
I think we're at 410 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere.
410?
Greater than 400.
All right.
Yeah.
Above 400.
That's right, isn't it?
No, other way.
What else? Even some of the basics.
So
What
we
is
have increasing storms and increasing droughts. And right now I'm thinking about the people of California who are in the worst drought in 1,000 years.
I think a lot about the people in California recently.
I'm also thinking about my own damn blueberries and, you know, well, there's lots of blueberries in Michigan and in the Midwest, but there's a lot of stuff that we get from California.
So food supplies are threatened by that. What else?
It impacts economically disadvantaged communities the most. People living in subsistence poverty, communities of color.
I just think a lot about the impacts, I mean, in general, and how we connect the dots to issues like hunger and water and you know, health and, you know, climate refugees. I mean, they're just, just
So what?
take a lot of different issues that congregations are working on, and you know, I think the impacts is, like Brian said, it impacts communities, you know, the most vulnerable communities first and hardest, but also it impacts a lot of things, a lot of other issues that we're already working on in various ways, and so connecting the dots to that.
You know, I was shocked to read the National Climate Assessment about the impact of climate change on of heat events on people with who are on SSRIs or other antidepressants or, you know, psychological, you know, mitigation
Well,
medications, and how, you know, all of a sudden you're just much more vulnerable if you're taking lots of things. Like, I don't know if it was high blood pressure medicine, but it just really made me think about, you know, who are the haves and have-nots in terms of being able to deal with heat waves.
Yes.
And not just you have an air conditioner and you don't, but how our bodies are differently able to deal with that.
Right.
Well, and that leads to thinking like there's not only physical impacts, but there's emotional and psychological impacts as well, spiritual impacts. And there's, you know, we spend a lot of time thinking about the physical impacts, but there's other ones.
You said emotional, spiritual, intellectual, or
Psychological.
Psychological.
Yeah.
Because of
Well, just the stress on our bodies, you know. I mean, there's physical stress that takes a toll, but also like think about those of us who are working on this issue all the time. I mean, think about the emotional and the psychological toll it takes on us when we feel like no one's listening.
right.
You know.
So from despair and grief. I was just working with a Quaker community, and there we did a climate conversation. We did strategic thinking, and one of the things that they feel like they can offer our memorial services for what we've lost. People were really emotional about that because there's so much that they don't want to think about that we've lost that they thought maybe we could do in community.
One thing I just want to say that I know is that as I think about how it's psychologically stressful to me, I think about what are the models predicting and what the risk of runaway climate change is. And that to me is like a huge specter on the horizon. So we're not just talking about some people are more impacted by this changing a little bit, but that there's a moment in time in which it's too late and we will spiral out of control. So that notion of a moment, a tipping point where and then there's all of the fear around that tipping point. Well, maybe it's already passed, and that whole uncertainty feels very psychologically overwhelming to me.
So this is, could you say a little bit more about the science that you understand about runaway? Just something very quick.
Yeah.
What is runaway climate change? So give an example of what a tipping point could
Okay,
be.
well, I think that, in Copenhagen, they said, we really don't want to get over 450 parts per million, because if we get over 450 parts per million, we might be at a point in which the permafrost will thaw, and then there'll be so much methane that's released that the temperature will go from, an increase of 4 degrees centigrade to 11 degrees centigrade in a number of decades, and that there'll be no way that we can catch up. And, and then, what James Hansen says is in Storms of My Grandchildren is that we will have an event like the Earth becoming like planet Venus.
Tammy says, can Julia explain the medication connection, because she hasn't heard that before.
So I can send out this to people. It's in the National Climate Assessment. It's about the impact of heat.
Brian, I've got an open one here.
The impact of heat on
It's really fun.
people who are taking certain medications, and what it does is it impacts the way that we thermoregulate. And you don't have the ability to thermoregulate if you're on certain medications, and so you can end up having a stroke or a heart attack or something, or a heat stroke much more easily.
Right, and we see that impacting people who are sick in other ways, people who are elderly.
Young
and
babies,
Yeah.
elderly.
Sometimes what I've told folks, when they start talking about tipping points, or if they think we're past a tipping point, I say, I don't know if we're past a tipping point, but I know that we're aware. And so we have incredible work to do to help other folks connect the dots, that I have to continue addressing this problem and working with you all, even if, God forbid, we are past a tipping point.
Yeah.
So it's a balance between acknowledging where we're coming at psychologically, but then logically, whether or not we're past a tipping point, I'm going to encourage local food. I'm going to encourage these solar panels.
I'm going to keep us moving, because right now it's a brain dump about what it is that we know about climate change. So we know about that. This is a group, obviously, that knows what there is to know about climate change.
Hopefully we do.
What I do want to pull out is, some of the basic, we talked about, we're over 400 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, and that is causing the average temperature on the globe to increase, and we've already increased a little bit over 1 degree Celsius. And two things that I like to bring together, because oftentimes when you're pulling this from a group, you get some of this, and you get a lot of some of the, some people are still figuring out a little bit of what climate change is, and there's experts in the group as well. It's always interesting balancing the different bits of knowledge, and some people are really intense about the details and other people are not. So the two things, I've shared this before, but are the ice core samples, right? That graph that you can draw up here, where we talk about that scientists, what are ice core samples? Can anybody tell me?
Drill down in the ice, and they can actually figure out how much carbon dioxide is in the actual air bubbles that are underneath the Earth. So you can see 450,000 years ago, what is the
composition of the
atmosphere, both in temperature and in the amount of carbon. And so what they found is that before, about 100 or so years ago, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere never went above 280 parts per million. Went up and down, but not, and what they also found is that
Let's have the pink one, the pink marker.
Temperature along those times basically fell in sync with the rise and fall of CO2. And so we already have said where we are now. So suddenly we're up here and we've begun to go up a little bit in temperature. And then we're concerned about what this might mean, right? What happened 100 or so years ago?
Industrial Revolution.
Industrial Revolution. And what happened in the Industrial Revolution?
We started burning fossil fuels.
Burning fossil fuels, right? So the big change here that's gotten us off the map in terms of human evolution on this planet has been the burning of fossil fuels. So I'm eternally grateful to the work of Bill McKibben, what Bill McKibben did, and I love that he published this analysis in Rolling Stone, the same issue that Justin Bieber was on. So Bill McKibben and Justin Bieber. And the day after the article was published, the editor called Bill McKibben and said, "You will never guess, but your story got more hits than Justin Bieber."
Oh, that's wonderful to hear.
It is. And so the name of his article was Global Warming's Terrifying New Math. And so he talked about 3 really important numbers when we're considering what's going on with climate change. And one is this 2 degrees Celsius. All the governments in the world have agreed that no matter what, we've got to keep the global average temperature under 2 degrees Celsius of an increase. Because of what Julia talked about, which is this danger of a tipping point. We've already gone 1 degree. So what some scientists did is they did some analysis and they said, basically, our estimation here is that we can burn about 585,
585, not 45.
thank you, 585 more gigatons of carbon and have a hope of keeping the increase below 2 degrees Celsius. And at the rate that we've been, that's about 16 years, 14 to 16 years, we will have burned that much. Right now, fossil fuel companies have in their reserves
2,795. I think that it might be 565 gigatons. But we'll put a question mark on that.
So what that means is that the fossil fuel companies know where the fuel is, and they're basing their business model off of the assumption that they're going to burn it. That's 5 times the amount we can afford to burn and have a hope of keeping the global average temperature below 2 degrees Celsius. So what that means is that we have to create a movement that's capable of keeping 80% of those reserves in the ground. So we're going to move on. Or what I'd like to hear is, well, as we talk about this, or as you think about it in your day-to-day work, what are the feelings that come up in regard to climate change?
With every challenge, you have an opportunity. So we have this big problem of climate change.
Mhm.
But in working towards that solution of keeping 80% of the reserves in the ground, we're talking about a revolution that I would love to be part of, that I need to be part of, that encourages local food. It has to have local food. That's the world I want to live in. So
Yeah.
you've introduced what the need is, or sort of the solution or direction our global civilization needs to go towards, and not this profit-driven, allowing ExxonMobil to get richer and richer by getting all of those gigatons into the pipeline, and really U-turning where we've been going since the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that you see that and you feel
A challenge.
Challenge.
A challenge, but an exciting opportunity as well.
And then you feel excitement. And like a wanting to be a part of something, like a wanting to.
An excitement that goes back to my childhood of frustration about what's happening in our society. It's not right that I can completely move to Cambridge, Boston, where because everybody's just like me out there. I don't mind being stuck in Ohio, even though politically it might be harder for me to live there because they don't accept my right to be in a marriage or whatever. I am motivated by a more local-based economy. I think that's what I'm neurologically wired to do and what I want to be part of.
Yeah. What are the other feelings that come up when you're thinking about this challenge, about climate change?
I'm just gonna say, I feel absolutely stuck and afraid. I feel like I'm swimming through molasses and it makes me like wanna cry.
Depressed.
And maybe once every week, I feel really incredibly motivated. And that is not,
The overarching.
that's not my overarching.
I often feel numb.
I think I'm sort of motivated by anger. I mean, honestly, because I mean, I don't feel depressed and afraid. I mean, I feel a sense of urgency, but I feel angry that fossil fuel interests and greed are driving the conversation, and I want to counter that. But I also feel, honestly, I feel hopeful most days. I mean, I feel hopeful because I know that we have the solutions. And as a person of faith, I ground myself in hope.
I feel really curious about the ways that we're sort of psychologically wired and how we can tell a new story. I'm curious about the new story. But mostly angry.
There are times I feel entrepreneurial. Is that a feeling?
What ambitious?
Yeah, ambitious maybe. Like, because it's similar to what you're saying. It's like curious what.
Yeah, how are we gonna
Creative.
solve
How are we gonna
this?
do this?
Yeah. Like
And
I
wanna
know
be
that
part
we're
of it.
smart enough to be solving this problem.
And I'm so curious about how there's a good band that says like anger is a gift. And it's like, I think it's something that has a little bit to do with maybe just your personality that, because I have been stuck in depression for too long about this issue. And I find it inspiring that you kind of don't allow yourself to go down the depression angle too much. That for some reason you jump right to anger that's married with hope. Like somewhere like, I'm justified to be angry about this.
I think it is I think it is the way I'm wired though, you know? I mean, I'm wired as like a hopeful person. I've had a difficult relationship with anger for a long time. We won't psychoanalyze me here. But I'm just saying, anger is not always constructive. It can be, it can be very destructive. I think it's how do we channel it? You know, what do we do with it?
Yeah. Good.
I think that I would love to talk a little bit about these different parts. It looks like we're starting getting into the analysis.
And before we do that, I'm gonna move us just to what does our faith have to do
Okay.
with this?
Is that the last question?
That is the last one that we're gonna do in this section before we dive into the action. What can we do together? So
Oftentimes we'll do the four that we're doing right now in one adult forum or one session, and then we'll do the next one, we'll do actions, and sometimes we'll do both together.
depending how long we have.
Yeah, we prefer to do it all together, but oftentimes the constraints of, the way that faith communities are set up, if somebody gives us 50 minutes, we'll do these 4 sections, and then we'll.
What is
Then
your
we'll-
ideal? You told me this. Your ideal ask is we want how many hours?
If we can get 2 hours
2
with the
hours.
community, that's great. 3 hours is a workshop, 2 hours is a,
I'm sorry.
is a conversation.
let's
So
keep
right
going
now we're
on.
going through this about 2/3 faster than you usually do. or at least twice as fast.
Yeah, but no, this is,
It
yeah.
depends, but I think it's nice to move at this clip.
Especially with this small of a group.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
but I've
this
even
is a
done
good
this, I did it in an hour and a half, I did it with 40 people in the large group and got to the action.
Yeah, totally.
So,
I sometimes do this whole thing with, like somebody will do a talk and I'll do 20 minutes afterwards to just, I'll hyper, speed it up.
Yeah. But let's exit that analysis for a second and just get, it's a question about like how our faith calls us to respond and also supports us to respond. I think, how does it inform our response? So not exactly what we're gonna do, but how does our faith, what are our faith's teachings? How does your personal relationship to your faith interact?
I'm just gonna say that like doing work in climate justice has, and I can say this in this faith circle, but it has immensely deepened my relationship with Jesus as a prophet and as a like incredible social justice leader. And so when I think about him turning over the money tables in the temple, and I think about it, even all of the sort of, he was not Minnesota nice, and that image of him speaking truth to power has been like incredibly helpful for me.
Yeah.
So I think bringing that
So doing
story
this work.
of bringing, speaking truth to power has
Okay, got
been very healing for me.
But also got him crucified.
I've been reminded of that actually on more than one occasion.
There's the cost.
I did have a board member tell me that.
Can I tell that story really
Yes,
quick?
please tell that
I
story.
heard her on the phone. They were in this heated battle, really, about the direction of solar. And he just could not see why we would slow down to make solar accessible when we have all this carbon going into the air. And I'm sure everybody here has dealt with that kind of argument. And Julia says, look, Jesus didn't wait first to see if they had a better economic model to be more just. He turned over the money tables. And then this person says, and look what happened to him. That's all it is.
So he said, and we know how that story ends. I was like,
So you're saying we do this
yeah, we
right?
do.
It ends with the resurrection.
I was like, we exactly know how that story ends. I don't know how you interpret it, but it was a moment.
Oh, man.
But let me tell you though, this guy,
He's decided that it's viable because it will open more markets.
he started the last board member meeting and he said, after many months, Julia's persistence has convinced me.
So you're saying when we do it right, we're gonna be potentially crucified?
We already are
We are, I know.
Resurrected.
resurrected.
I would say that,
Just keep in mind we're interfaith.
we had a
Not everyone working.
quote in the paper, Lisa Dayhill said that we're no better than Judas selling Jesus for 30 pieces of silver if our state goes ahead with freezing our renewable portfolio standard. And when she said that on the press phone call, I braced myself because I thought, wow, I never hear a faith leader go out on a limb like that. But she wasn't going out on a limb. She was speaking the absolute truth, and she was comparing it back to a very Christian story. And it was true. By our state doing the short-term, bigger money-making direction, it was a sin. So I'm so inspired by that quote, and I use that quote a lot when I'm engaging you. And it got in the Plain Dealer, which is a large paper from Cleveland.
I want to bring a Buddhist story to the table.
Keeping it interfaith.
Just keeping it interfaith, because we do this in a lot of interfaith communities. So I did this I did a conversation at the Buddhist Meditation Center in Minneapolis and had an incredible conversation. And they talked about the cycle of rest and reflection and action and how that plays out in their faith community. And talked about how to balance the, so, we look at, how does it make us feel? And there were people saying, I feel angry, and people who were saying, I feel hopeful, and people who were saying, I'm depressed and motivated. And there's all these, and yin and yang of the movement. So they talked about how disconnecting from the situation could be a really powerful way to stay positive, and how having cycles of rest and action would be, that their model of that could be really useful to our interfaith community. And it has been. We've started to model some of our work around some of the structures that they use at this meditation center. So that was really great.
I just want to make sure I'm not going to butcher the spelling, but we have a, one of our board members is Jewish, and she talks a lot about tikkun olam, which
Yeah.
is to repair the world, that calling. So, thank you.
I think that the image of how, I'm going to go back to the Hebrew scriptures, which is also powerful in Islam. I'm going to tell two quick stories and then I'll be done. One is just the fact that prophets were speaking unpopular things. Again, it was the same story as Jesus speaking truth and power, but what was it that many of these different prophets, whether it was Isaiah or Amos or what was coming up for them, or ultimately Muhammad. He was speaking out in a place where it was unpopular. And then I want to say that from one of our Muslim board members, we were having a climate conversation in his community. I don't think I've told you this story. And he was saying that when he was growing up, his mother used to say they would run and they'd be smashing the ground with sticks as they were boys. And his mother would say, no, Rahul, you have to stop because you need to treat the earth gently because the ancestors are buried under us, and because the earth is our body, and because the way that we treat the earth is our own fate. And that was coming right out of her tradition about there's a lot of story about justice in Islam, but there's also a story about justice to the earth. There's maybe less, but that was he grew up in Bangladesh, and that was his story about his mother.
So I have Tammy.
Yay!
Tammy says she thinks about right relationship. So right relationship with God being righteousness, and right relationship with others and with all of creation being justice, and how our actions have messed up those relationships. And she says she likes the way Cal DeWitt talks about it as 7 gifts and 7 degradations in a book called Earthwise.
Thank you, Tammy. Okay. So normally what I do right now is say, wow, this really is rich. We have a lot of rich story and rich understanding that moves us forward into action. And there's really particular gifts in ways that this community or your communities are going to be positioned to respond to climate change. And so we're going to dive into some of those possibilities now. So I'm going to pause that, and let's take some time to reflect on what we just did, looking at the story of connection, going to what we know about climate change, how does it make us feel, and what did we see, what did we learn, what seemed to be working, what didn't work, what questions? Is that too broad?
Can you put the categories up?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The things we went through.
I'm going to sort of say something about the what do we know for a second, because it's on my mind and I might forget. One of the things, again, this is an opportunity for us to sort of debrief the tools and why we've constructed them in this way and what your questions are and what our responses might be, but your responses to other people at the same time. We're all just, stewing in this mix here. One of the things I've been reading a lot about, the American Psychological Association talks about one of the major, there's a great report if you all haven't seen it. I think I posted it on one of our conference calls, but it was 2010 APA Barriers to Action on Climate Change. One of them is this social norming. if something is not normative, it's not normative to care about climate change, then people don't want to care about climate change. So they're looking around at their neighbors, and if their neighbors are all caring about it, they're like, shoot, I better care about it too and do something about it. But if other people aren't, and that I think is one of our biggest barriers, is why we're feeling lonely. And so what I have found is, we could more quickly just give them a sheet and say, here is what you need to know about climate change, right? And that's what people have been in IPLs and all over the movement have been doing for a long time, is doing that 1 hour presentation about how horrible the world, climate change is and how screwed we are. But in fact, if we let people generate their own ideas, it's chaotic and it's challenging to write them all down, and sometimes people say the wrong facts. But what it does is it makes it socially normative to know about climate change. So everybody in the room is looking around and they're like, wow, Susan knows about climate change, Deb knows about climate, I better know something too. And so I think that it's very powerful to let the group define what they know for that reason. But the tension is that it's and Aaron and I have been, again, we've done this in so many congregations. We think that we need to get a fact sheet that we would hand out after the session that might help people sort of collapse. Here's the 10 fun facts, whatever, not fun facts, obviously.
Fast.
Facts. But fast facts or something like that you can use as you're talking about it. But nobody wants to be told, wow, you're dumb. I'm going to tell you all these things and you better listen to me. Like, that relationship has been part of the problem in the way that we've been messaging about it. But in fact, it is important for them to know about, like what Aaron was doing, the ice core samples and the 3 numbers so trying to figure out what the balance of not being the expert, socially norming knowledge about climate change, but at the same time not leaving people not having enough critical information, because there is, they say 70% of Americans know about climate change, but less than 1 in 3 ever talk about it. But what do they know about climate change? That is the question that I think is really important. And a lot of times what we're finding is that they know a little, enough that, wow, it's a problem, but they haven't necessarily really understood what is truly at risk. So we're really hoping that by doing this in 5 states that we can get a lot more insight about this section on what do we know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, to your point, I think it speaks to tribes, the idea of tribes. Like, so if you think about it's the congregation, think about that's their tribe, it's one of their tribes. They might have multiple tribes. They have a family tribe and they have a social tribe, and they have, so people have multiple ones, but it's a place of trust. I mean, a tribe is a place of trust. So if you're sharing information in a place of trust for people, it is easier to have a conversation, even a difficult conversation, when you're in your tribe, because these people, you love them, you trust them. So I think that's a better, and it speaks to having a conversation instead of having someone come in and present to you, which is the sort of the model that we sort of have been stuck in, is I'm going to come in and I'm going to present to you what I know, and then you're going to agree with me, and that there's a problem, and then you're going to agree with my solutions, and then we're all going to go home happy. And when in reality, that they may never engage in that topic again when it's not a conversation.
Exactly. There's something in the world of psychology called motivational interviewing. It's based on that understanding that if we, just the way humans work, if we tell somebody what they're going to do or give information without being invited to, that there's automatic resistance, even if we're telling them the best news ever. And so by saying, what do you know? Then it's inviting them into it, and so it breaks down a lot of that resistance. So it's also less overwhelming.
So you're saying people kind of give up if they don't know a lot about climate change, and then we come in too much like the experts. There's a subconscious thing going on where people kind of give up and let go because you're the expert, and I don't understand what she's saying anyway.
It's not mine. I'm not involved in this.
Jack, I have
Someone
other
else is
issues.
imposing this on me. But we say, what do you know? Then it invites them into that space. It
Keeping
invites
their ear
their
open.
agency, their knowing. And it's this, even if is something like, is it okay if I share some of my thoughts about this with you? Just asking that, when people kind of feel obligated to say yeah, has been shown to make people more open to what you're going to say, than saying it without asking permission.
Question from Cleveland.
Yes.
Yay.
What did Aaron ask us to move us from the feelings part to the last question? How do you sum up the deep sharing of feelings part when you're facilitating to a group? So I remember when we were trying to practice this in my director's house, that we have a hard time pivoting or transitioning on to the next step. Particularly because if I really tell you how I feel, I think all of us hit that moment where you can cry.
Yeah.
And the crying's okay.
Yeah.
But how to have us go through the checklist of the structure of this conversation.
Can I just say one thing? I want to say that I do cry sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't cry in the majority of climate conversations, but I absolutely think that like having people cry is powerful and important. Obviously, it's important for the facilitator to be trusted and moving things along, and you don't want people feeling sorry for you. Right?
Or the facilitator's crying, oh, this is really serious.
Yeah. But so taking it away from the facilitator conversation, there's one of the leaders of the sort of climate movement in Minnesota cries on a fairly regular basis as he's presenting, and it is disarming and it is incredibly powerful.
Well, he comes from a policy organization where you wouldn't expect the ED to cry.
And a man. I mean, let's just be real.
Yeah.
A man
Yeah.
cries.
Yeah, so it's just, but boy, does that like open up people in a different, it's like.
Absolutely.
I want to say something about this part because, and definitely speak to that question about how to pivot to the next piece. We intentionally let it get low here. Like that's part of the design. Because we know that we are making this conversation. We're not going to even end with how our faith calls us to respond. We're going to end with solutions. We're going to start talking, engaging the community in a conversation about what we can do together. If we weren't going to do that, then it would be a problem to let it go really low here. Low in terms of feeling depressed and low energy and kind of like a somberness. But because this is based on, a lot of, I would say, theology and understanding about the grief process and the way that we have been so isolated, that to first say what we know, and then, it's heavy to do, and I'd like to hear what you all think about doing, the ice core samples and the 3 numbers. The reason that I like to do that is because oftentimes what people throw out in the what do you know can feel disparate to people. Okay, well, there's the loon is going to go extinct in Minnesota, and we have a lot of Lyme's disease, and there's sea levels rising here, that it can kind of just feel not ambivalent, but kind of what Tammy was saying earlier, like it's such a big issue. How do you know what the hard stop is, or what the deadline is, or and so this brings it into stark, like, this is, the carbon amounts. This is what happens with the temperature. This is where we are. This is where we're headed. And then this is the hard stop. We have to keep 80% in the ground. It just paints it into a kind of pretty urgent place. And I think that what I find in communities is not everybody is aware. They might be worried, they might be concerned, but they're not aware, not everybody, of the urgency.
Yeah.
And then that sets this up well to go into the feelings, because people are like sitting with that heaviness or that kind of immensity and that sense of like, oh crap. And then what do you feel? And I will say here, what are you feeling now? Or not assuming that this necessarily has evoked a lot for them. What do you feel in general when you're facing this? What do you want to share? And normally what people will say is they will say the angry, they will say the depressed, and I don't rush through this part, but I just kind of pause and like let those emotions be present. Usually somebody will say, I feel hopeful because I'm sitting in this room and talking about it. Or this is not something that I normally get to share with anybody. And so that's what's powerful here, is that people are in general really hungry for a place to have those feelings, or if they're more still in the denial place, not denial of climate change, but like of being afraid to really face it. This is a dip into it for people, which, as we learned from Mary Piper, who wrote The Green Boat, and she's that psychologist. I think that book is just brilliant.
By the way, there's a piece by Mary Piper over here, and it should be in your folders.
It's called We Are All Climate Deniers. She's talking about that we go through this process, and so often part of what keeps us avoidant of really facing the issue is the fear of feeling these things, of really feeling them. So when we can do that as a community and then move through it into action, then it can actually become liberating and less of a barrier. And so the way that I like to pivot from the feelings to here is an acknowledgement of what we just shared. Wow, there's a wide range of feelings. These are feelings I think most of us can relate to. How in the face of that does our faith call us to respond? How in the face of what we know and these feelings that come up around it do we respond? It's pretty simple of a pivot.
Yeah.
I don't think that we need to do a lot of vocal analysis in the climate conversation with the community to move us there.
Can I just say, so what you all need to know is this is a methodology that is not only individualized in terms of how facilitators do it, but also in progress in terms of how Erin and I are learning about it. It's changed a lot over the last year. The way that I work the pivot is oftentimes people will say, I feel angry, I feel depressed, I feel numb, and then there'll always be, I feel hopeful. There'll be both of those pieces, and I'll say, this is really interesting that we feel both of these, the tension between these two things. I said, what is unique about being in a faith community, being here together, that gives us the ability to move from numbness to motivation? And what does that arrow look like? Because in order for us to turn this ship around, we need to have enough motivation. We need to have enough action that we can then, together do something. And that gets people excited about the idea of taking action. But then it really gets them into it depends on how you pivot, how positive the faith call looks like. The way that you make that pivot will change the way that the list looks in terms of the faith, how people. One problem that I have had again and again, when you said, how is your unique faith community, I will say, how is your faith community, positioned to respond to this? What is it in your tradition or in your community that is, can be valuable to us at this unique moment in time? And people will sometimes say the kinds of things that we said. Where are they up there? But oftentimes they'll, there's always the person who's like, well, we've changed from styrofoam cups to ceramic cups. You noticed how Erin sort of nipped that in the bud before the conversation even started. She said, what we're really looking for is, and how did you say it? I don't remember how exactly you said it, but what we're really looking for is what in the tradition or in the, the deeper spiritual, community or something like that, rather than saying, for a long time I've gotten caught in the, how is this community unique and responding or something like that, and
yeah, I think it's important to separate this one from what can we do as a community.
You're talking about working from values versus executing a checklist.
Yeah. So
And there is a balance. If I don't have a checklist, I don't feel like I'm progressing, but if I don't remember to stay grounded in my values, this isn't gonna be as long of a.
right. So you got to remind them that you're looking for the spiritual tradition. What is unique about being a Presbyterian in this? I don't know this because it oftentimes people love to talk about the practical and the minutia, and we want that in some
Somebody
way,
might
but
have
not
been
right
waiting
now.
to have the debate about the styrofoam. Like, yes, we're finally gonna talk about the styrofoam. And
Right, exactly.
I cheered her on, but that's not.
That's not the point.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's too much styrofoam.
So let's keep debriefing here. What happened in the stories of connection? Let's pop back up here.
Well, we found commonality. I mean, I think that's sort of, didn't all have the same story, but we found clear pieces where we were like, yeah, it's about this
thing.
Or even in common values that we all have, that
I stopped feeling like I was doing my job and started feeling like I could like really, it was like almost meditative for me.
be a human, be a person.
I was just like, oh, you know, just really got me into a heart place.
The deep, it was great. When you're live, a room full of people, 10 to 15 or more, keep it short. Like,
How do we do it when it's
there's like
bigger?
some practicality of it.
Yeah.
Where like,
Oh,
So let me, I was
Yeah.
speak to that. So
yeah,
normally, I will model. I think that's really, really important, is that the facilitator models or has somebody pre-prepared to model a story that's meaningful and tell it in that kind of way. And then we give them 30 seconds to think to themselves, and then they get in pairs.
I got it.
So then each
They're
person
breaking it
gets
up, okay.
3 minutes, depending on your time frame, 2 to 3 minutes. It really doesn't take much longer than that to share with each other. So 4 to 6 minutes in pairs total. And then the way we share as a group, we don't ask people to share their stories, but we come back.
We don't have time to debrief everybody's breakout.
No, so that's what the way that we share is we say, well, what in your stories, what were you connecting to? And I don't always do the nature thing. Sometimes, like I think I shared on that phone call with you, a story that I like to share is one of my mom's and my grandmother, and she was dying, and my mom's last moments with her, and the grief and the heartache and the grace that came through it. So the story of connection doesn't necessarily have to be about nature. Oftentimes the stories people share, I'll share one from nature and one from human connection, will go on both sides. So we're really pulling out like the fact that climate change is not just about nature, right? It's about our human relationships and people. And so our stories of connection will touch both of those. And so we share in the larger group this finding the common ground.
what is so cool is that as I think back on all the different conversations I've had, it depends on exactly how you phrase the question. In other groups, I've said stories of connection, and I can say, you know, if you say connections to a natural place, to other people, to a community, in which you really felt like an aha, you know, moment, and in which case, in those cases, the stories sometimes come when I had one person tell a story about when they were running. They didn't know what to do in their life. They couldn't make a decision about their career, and finally they had been running this distance, and they were able to, you know, an aha moment came up, and that was a really powerful way to do it too, because you know it was like one of those moments of real. We've said moments of clarity for you. Sometimes we've used that one. I think
Or moments of the holy.
Moments of the holy. It depends on how long you have sometimes. If you say moments of clarity or moments of the holy, I don't know, sometimes people need more a little more time to come up with that moment of clarity story. The connection word, it seems like it's been played better for us. Is that accurate?
That's definitely accurate.
Yeah.
Well, and because I think that clarity often people kind of like, I had an intellectual insight, and what we want to do is get them to the heart. So yeah, we say stories of connection is really broad. I want to stop for a moment and just like have us stand up and stretch. Is that okay?
Could we have 20 minutes till we're
Yeah, but I heard the analysis, right, that sitting for too long is just as bad as like smoking. So I don't want to put anybody's health at risk here, but do something I'd like to do I was taught by a mentor. It's called the strategy stretch. So when we're thinking about acting on climate change and organizing, we invite people at home to do the same, to stand up. We first need to look for the big perspective, the big vision, and so we're going to stretch up through the ceiling all the way up to the stars and galaxies above us. And just notice where you're tight and tense, and just let yourself pull up from here. And then in this work, we need each other. We need our allies. So we need all of you and all of you and boom, and all those trees outside. And notice where your tents and just stretch as you stretch out for all the unexpected resources and abundance that's available to us. And then we definitely need the ground. And we need the roots and the humus where our food is grown. I invite you to just scoop up that energy, that good nutrients, and let your legs stretch out. And with a big, deep breath, we're gonna scoop up all of the goodness and then just let it fall on us down to our hearts. And then just shake it out. Shake it out. Okay. So we're doing okay. We're not doing good on time at all, actually. Are there any more, while you just stand for a moment, are there any more like points of wondering what might work or not work, or questions or nuances we want to pull from here?
Do you guys think you guys can, this is no problem, right? Just do it.
Okay, great. So let's dive in with this little bit of time that we have left to what can we do? Like, what
I'm gonna hand out these things while you start here.
can we do?
Do you guys did you get all these?
Action.
I got it, yes.
Susan, did you get all these things? Yes, did you get these things?
Okay, so people feel pretty overwhelmed about what kind of actions we can take that are really going to make a difference. What Julia referenced, the American Psychological Association barriers to action. And one of the big barriers to action is lack of perceived control. And that is in the sense that in the face of such an immense problem, you know, doing this little thing or that little thing is not to scale. It's not going to make a difference. And so therefore, I'm just not going to do anything about it. I'm going to avoid it. So there's what people say is, you know, well, it's go big or go home, really. Mary Piper says, in the face of something overwhelming, our job is to get bigger than it. One of the ways that we've found that provides a powerful container for conceiving of action that includes different theories of changes and different types of projects within a framework that makes sense is this three-legged stool. And we shared that with you all before, I think. Just to quickly review, one of the legs of the stool is the practical. And so it's all those things that reduce our carbon footprint. And then there's the movement building and the systemic. That's those things that we do that link together our individual actions to influence culture and policy. So it's policy work, it's marches and big gatherings, it's the fossil fuel divestment movement, it's community solar, it's anything that pulls together our actions to have a larger influence. And then there's the spiritual and the relational. That's how we mend our relationship with each other, with the earth, to reconnect our hearts and therefore our caring and our empathy. It's the climate conversations, it's our worship. So oftentimes people will get stuck and say, we're not going to make a difference unless we reduce our carbon footprint. We're not going to make a difference unless we change policy. We're not going to make a difference until we change our hearts and the framework from which we view the world. We say we need all of those things. Not only that, but everything we design as an action can actually touch on all three legs of the stool. An example of this is at a Methodist church that had a rain garden that wasn't functioning. They wanted to get it functioning. Normally, the 4 people who care about that would go and do it. And then they go back to their work. We said, how can we make that touch on all 3 legs of the stool? Now what they're going to do is they are writing about it in the newsletter. They're inviting children to come and help them plant the bee-friendly plants in the rain garden. They're talking in worship about how they are now a bee-friendly, Be Caring Community. They're going to their annual conference to share with other Methodist churches what they're doing. And they're also reducing runoff, right? So that's how you take something and actually start to work towards that shift of identity in the faith community that Julia was talking about earlier.
Can I just say another example? So solar is a great one. People put up solar and they feel really proud of it, but in Minnesota we want to say, you know what, we wouldn't be putting the solar up if Minnesota IPL and our partners hadn't gone to the Capitol in 2013 to pass the omnibus bill.
Yeah.
That made it possible for us to have the funding, and the incentives, and to have the legislation necessary to have community solar. And our partners in other Minnesota or other IPL states don't have this. So we're excited about having gone to the Capitol. We now have this practical opportunity. And now we're going to figure out what's a whole new set of worship opportunities for us to connect to this concept of sunshine. And it's so fun to let people do that. So in our worship service this past Sunday at St. Mary's, our pastor actually had people at the tables writing prayers about, so each of the group of people, what is your prayer that connects to the climate crisis and to all of these opportunities we have. So anyway, that's just another three-legged stool example.
Yeah. Great. And so one of the ways that when faith communities are like, what can we do to get involved? We lay out on-ramps to action, opportunities to take action, framed underneath practical solutions, movement-building solutions, and relational, spiritual solutions. It seems powerful. Some communities are heavier on one or heavier on the other, and so then they're working. What's key about this is that because some people, they love to lead worship, or they love to work with the kids, they don't want to change light bulbs. And if all the green team is doing is working on this, it's not going to draw in the other people. But what if these people are asked to bring the kids to the installation of the new light bulbs, which has happened, maybe not the light bulbs, actually, but the weatherization or something like that. So this expands who finds interest in the work as well.
Some of our congregations try to silo these into committees, and we think that it's okay to have committees, but when the committees are too siloed and not forced to work together, then people start saying, oh, that's his work, not my work, and that's a problem.
Yeah. So.
Can I clarify a question?
Absolutely.
What you're saying right now, you do this live in the climate conversation?
Yeah.
Okay. This is how you end.
Well, yes. This is close to how we end.
The long version.
It's the longer version.
But you covered the 3 legs.
Cover the 3 legs.
And that's helpful, sorry,
Yeah.
that's helpful too, because we have some really great move to amend folks that are good at getting people in the room, but they kind of only want to talk about ending corporate personhood.
Right.
Yes.
And so Catherine Hayhoe said, we don't have the time to wait for the political ideal political situation, but the organizer in me says, but that's what gets him to get people in this room. So to move it back into, that's your leg on the stool, and that's awesome, that's what jazzes you up.
Yes.
And we're doing these other 2 legs as well.
Yeah,
And
but
it's all
invite them
needed.
into all. Say if you're gonna have your leg succeed, you gotta invite all these people, or you're never gonna succeed. So you should actually come and be with the kids at the same time that you're working on this other thing. Yeah. Okay.
So where I'm headed with this is it's our strategy, our strategic planning when we think about goal setting. So what we're wanting with many of these faith communities is, even if it's an interfaith gathering and there's a few people from different faith communities or not at all, we do this anyway. But we think about this thing that's just totally used in organizing all the time. What is your vision? What is the world that you want to create, that you want to live in? And then let's create a goal that helps us move towards actualizing that vision. And we're going to figure out what our strategy is, which is the way that we're going to reach that goal. Strategy. Wow. And then identify at least these first few tactics or actions that we're going to take that will help us reach this goal. There's a really cool game I'd love to share that with you all that elicits this experience in terms of group planning and group process. But a simple way of understanding this is, say that we have a boulder in the middle of the room. We're not going to be able to meet in here. If this boulder is here, we've got to figure out a way to get it out. So our goal is to remove the boulder. How are we gonna do it? Well, there's a few ways we could. We could decide to lift it and carry it out, or we could get a forklift. Which one we choose will be our strategy. If we do person power, then our tactics will be different. We might need to go and work out, and then practice like how to lift without injuring yourself. Or if somebody needs to get a forklift license and go practice, we need to raise the money to do it, right? So that indicates the tactics. So what we normally say is, so thinking about these 3 legs of this stool, if there's enough people in the room to do this, I want you to tell us, who's really interested in working on a practical goal, a movement goal, a spiritual goal. And then we're going to divide into 3 different groups, and you're going to work for a minute on identifying a goal and some of the initial tactics that you would do to begin actualizing that goal. What we do here does not mean that it's your long-range plan. You're not wedded to it. But this is an opportunity for us to begin thinking, and for you as a community to begin thinking about what might make sense based on the interests that the people in your group have, the skills, the resources that are there. So then we have people go into their groups, come up with usually what they can come up with as a goal and some of the initial tactics. And then if we have time, we do a report back. And then for that team, they have some great material to call for a follow-up meeting.
And this, by the way, I wouldn't do this in a 45-minute adult forum. I would end at this in a 45-minute adult forum. But we really try to schedule these things so we have enough time for them once they've got it into the I feel so horrible and hopeless but motivated. We have some unique things in our congregation, and actually let's get busy planning something so that they feel like, wow, this is this
Right.
Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, very useful.
I call it climbing up the mountain.
Yeah, you gotta start getting a strategy for how to do that.
Well, and it's fun. When they get in the groups and you start thinking and you start, it's energizing.
Yeah.
Right, that's the point.
I want to say that we've also done this. Okay, so if there's small circle, if you get people in circles, right? You could say, pretend you're sitting at your kitchen table, and sometimes what's fun to do is to say, let's plan a hypothetical, something that you all are one thing that you're going to do together that will, relate to what your unique vision is, and be bringing in the talents and the interests of all the different people who are sitting at your group.
Oh, so you're talking about garden party?
Yeah, I'm just sort of, because I know we need to talk about that a little bit. And what's fun about that is that you'll have in a circle, maybe you'll have an artist, and you'll have somebody who's a writer, and somebody who loves to plan events, and then they plan a poetry slam that involves everybody getting a prize for how they represent climate change or something. But anyway, that's just an example of something, they're sort of encouraged to come up with tactics that involve what they're really passionate about. So if you have a group that's really passionate about the garden, then how can that garden become part of the tactics that will help them all move to? Because oftentimes, and I'll just say that I think about Aikido sometimes. If you all know about Aikido, you can you could be like pushing to try to achieve something that's hard, and that feels really hard. Or you could be like, wow, what I'm really good at is this, and I can just bring what I'm good at into this movement. It will flow into the river of wonderful solutions that this community has to offer. So in Aikido, you turn the energy of your opponent, or who's there.
Keep going with it.
You keep going with that energy, and you move it. So we want to take the energy we already have and bring it into this emerging strategy for this particular faith community. So, one of the things that Erin and I always do before we go into a community is we work with a core team prior to doing the climate conversation, and we learn a little bit about that community. Because then we know, wow, the thing that they're most wild about is this garden, and they're also really connected to their legislator, or we'll have a sense of what some of those tactics might be, so that we can really honor them and help them to construct them into a plan that will work.
And for any team that's working in a faith community is going to have multiple goals. and then, I mean, you can make this macro or you can scale this in and out.
Yeah.
Or otherwise it can get confusing about what you mean by goals and tactics, but. Awesome, so we're at the end of our time and we want to respect your time. I think one of the interests that we had, if we had the time, was to have you all map out how you want to use climate conversations as, you know, as a part of your plan towards moving towards your vision or the strategies that you mentioned before. You know, what part does it play? We reflect often on what part does climate conversations play for us in moving us forward. And
So yeah, actually, I'd like to, if it's possible, we could go back to what we initially talked about. What are some of the visions that we have, right? We can make this an assignment for our next phone call. How about that? You know, if in fact our vision is to create this, if this is our vision, right? Our goal in Minnesota might be by 2016, we want to have recruited 50 more congregations into having a climate conversation, and we want to do it in this way. So that would be our vision, and then we would say what our goals are. And so then I think what would be useful for us as a interfaith, whatever, multi-state interfaith community is to say, how is it that climate conversations have become a, how are climate conversations just one tactic on the road to reaching our vision, right? And, you know, why does it represent these, you know, sort of bridges? How does it help feed into these bridges that we identified rather than reinforcing what some of those, you know, and breaking down the barriers? So I think it would be great if we, during our next phone call, actually said, hey, in Iowa, you know, the tactic works in this way, if that makes sense.
My director's asking, has Minnesota IPL followed up to learn how climate conversations have resulted in change locally? Which I think you're kind of saying, but what would be is there something like 8 weeks after, a month after that's common with places that you've had?
Yeah, so if I want to say, if our strategy is to fully, you know, is that we're going to use relational organizing, you know, so this is just, I'm watching the clock, I'm going to say this in less than 1 minute. If our strategy is rather than having, you know, 2,000 signatures on a petition or doing transactional organizing, our strategy is to use is to really deepen the leadership within every one of those faith communities so that we actually have vibrant, self-sustaining leadership structures that we don't have to tend to. We don't want to own every idea that these congregations have. We want to let them be powerful in a way that they can then have emerging ideas that we may not even hear about, but will lend to this growing climate movement, right? So that's our strategy. So then our first tactic is to find out who the leader is. And, you know, maybe it's the green team leader or the set of leaders in a congregation that we're really curious about, to have a one-on-one with them. Maybe from that one-on-one, we get invited to a core team meeting, like a justice and witness team meeting. That there's maybe 4 or 5 or 6 people sitting around, and we really ask them, what do you care about, and what are your, assets, what are your, hopes and dreams. And then we suggest, maybe a climate conversation for your community would be a good idea. This is just what happened, and it happens multiple times. And so then we go and we do a climate conversation, and then the next tactic is to have a garden party or a more strategic planning session with that congregation. So, here's the climate conversation, and then there's the sort of the strategic, conversation where we get people together to talk about what are your assets, what do you want to do, how will your congregation engage in this? And then from that strategic thing, we hope that they will then get involved in, X, Y, and Z campaign. Moving from the climate conversation to the strategic planning, we have one congregation, the UU congregation, that really, really cares about racial justice. And so what we like them to do is figure out strategically how are they going to combine all of their passion and their interest and their knowledge about racial justice into a climate, a environmental justice campaign? What are 3, campaigns that they can work on that will really help to marry those 2 ideas? And then from there, we rush towards our goal of having a self-sustaining leadership so that we don't actually have to pay attention at all to that congregation in 2 years. That they're doing wonderful things, they're linking into our tools when we call a legislative lobby day, that it's a no-brainer that they'll show up, that they are part of our network, but that they're not needing our attention all the time.
Are you
So-
gathering or signing information at the time?
Always, yeah. So we're definitely building our list all the time to keep people linked in and to keep them appraised of, for example, June 6th, huge Midwest tar sands resistance march. So you guys should all come.
So the point being, it's transactional on some level.
It's transactional in that we keep their information. It's not transactional. It's relational in that we then keep in relationship with them and that we tell them the stories that we're bringing to life, and they can come if they feel so.
Yeah, and doing
motivated.
petitions is not in and of itself transactional.
Yeah, it can be really.
I don't think, you're all behind petitions, it's not like you're not.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's just that they get. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I'm trying to move too fast. But petitions is a way for people to speak truth to power, right? It is.
Start a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not like sign my petition. I don't really care who you are.
Right.
It's a sign my petition because you're.
A lot of things is we use, I'm sure you all do, getting these folks who are interested in stepping up and doing something about climate change to get others to sign petitions, and then it becomes an empowering action for them to take.
And just so you speak very quietly, and so Brian
Sorry.
asked, you collect sign-in sheets. It
Yeah.
started with, there's a sign-in sheet, right? And you said, of course. And
Of
we
course,
need
yeah.
to talk about
Thanks.
petitions, so.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And one of the reasons is, and by the way, this is one of the reasons we feel it's really important as the communication comes out from Minnesota IPL to be invitational and not, we want to make people love having the ability to link in with that's what movement building is all about, is for people to say, yeah, I'm going to accept the invitation to bring people from my congregation to the tar sands resistance march. That's awesome. And some congregations, that's not their thing. And so what they really want to do is to be involved in the community solar project. That's more their personality, in which case we have options for them to do all those things, especially because we work with partners and we don't have to develop those options ourselves.
And I just think to answer that, you answered that question beautifully about what are the outcomes, and I think that climate conversation in a one-shot deal, we're not claiming suddenly
Victory.
results in people being like activated
Climate
ongoing
crisis is solved.
organizers. No, it's useful as a part of a sequence.
So we have a program called Be the Spark. We want to get them involved in the Be the Spark
Leadership
development program. It's a 14-hour program. We'd love to get their youth involved in the Youth Be the Spark. So we want both of those things, and then we want them to be able to move the dial, on energy efficiency or any of the sorts of things that we've been talking about. So that as an organization, we want them to be signing petitions and doing energy audits and all those things, but we want them to come to it by their own power, so that it's through their own motivation, not because we've either rewarded them externally or because then it becomes silent.
You're making a list of tactics down there as we're going further closer to the goal.
Yeah. So can we just take a deep breath together and just express gratitude for coming and being a part of this, and maybe say one word besides tired that you're leaving with? Well, you can say that too. I would say gratitude to you all.
Let me say clarity, more clarity.
I will say grateful. Thank you both for your leadership today.
And I'm gonna say spinning.
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 Do you want to act it out?
I
on
can
the chair?
always do.
Yeah.
You better come right over here. Woo!
And
I like it.
I'm still stuck on this entrepreneurial word. All of this feels very vibrant. I think it was vibrant.
Beautiful. Well, may we have a vibrant conference together too.
And dinner.
And dinner. Yeah. Thanks everybody so much for being
Thank
on.
you for.
Yeah.
All right.
Yay,
Go,
bye.
friends.
And we'll